Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 at 92.1 FM. Happy to be with you to talk some sports after an incredibly eventful weekend in the world of sport. Goodness gracious, there was a lot going on over these last 2 or 3 days. Stanley Cup champion crowned. NBA champion crowned. One of the wildest, strangest, most peculiar sports spectacles we have ever seen, with a UFC fight on the White House lawn last night. That also happened. And, of course, the backdrop for all of this is an epic celebration of sports culture, international competition, the World Cup being hosted by 11 American cities. North American World Cup, but we really know what this is about. It's about USA, USA, USA. And how about the U.S. men's national team getting off to an absolutely blistering start in their World Cup run, 4-1 victory over Paraguay. And there's a lot of people who try to do the, oh, well, it's Paraguay. It's just a Paraguay thing. Look, we talked with Carlos Mauricio Ramirez heading into the weekend on Friday's show. He had some serious concerns. A lot of people had serious concerns about this game, about that match. And this Paraguay team has some formidable things that you have to get past, starting with the score in the 7th minute of the contest. Team USA did what they needed to do. Secured the points, puts themselves in a really interesting position for group play. And also in the same group, Australia knocking off Turkey. You're going to have to get used to saying it that way. That's why you play the games. You don't just roll the ball out and say whoever's more talented, whoever's favored is going to win this thing. Man, we got a lot to get to on the show today. We'll do our best to hit it all. Spencer Warren, the Gov, is going to bring us some World Cup insights in about half an hour. He's joining us at 11:30. World Cup talk is brought to you by our friends at Beer Bar. Isaac Shade, Locked On College Basketball, and Locked On Tar Heels, to talk some Cam Boozer, to talk some upcoming NBA draft. Of course, we'll also talk about the championship attained by the New York Knicks in San Antonio. They closed it out on the road. We'll do that with Isaac Shade. And then Tom Callahan to discuss Stanley Cup final now being in the books. Carolina, for the second time in franchise history, is Stanley Cup champions. And their head coach, Rob Brindamore, becomes one of, I think it's 7 players to win as head coach and as player.
So it's an even more exclusive list, OC, because he was the captain of the Hurricanes.
The 2006 team, yeah.
So Sean McDonough said as soon as the final buzzer sounded, he's only one of 4 former captains to win a Stanley Cup as a player and head coach for the same franchise. So it's even more exclusive when you look at who the captains were of those Stanley Cup winning teams.
And when it's for the same franchise, right?
Yeah.
Because there's guys who have been players and coaches, played for one franchise, coached for another, whatever.
So cool story for Rod Brindamore and Carolina Hurricanes fans.
And sorry, Mitch Marner, it seemed like almost no-brainer run to the Conn Smythe to potentially the full realization of an ultimate redemption story after tough days in Toronto, runs up against the Carolina Hurricanes team that closed it out on you 3-0 in the final game. You go home without the cup. You go home without the Conn Smythe.
Yeah.
And people are going to look at Mitch Marner's play in the Stanley Cup Final Series because he kind of faded. He disappeared.
And I was going to say, Carolina seemed to do to Vegas what Vegas did to other teams in this postseason. Did you get that feeling too, OC, watching this, where it was like, especially with the Mammoth and the Ducks series for Vegas, it was like, okay, you guys are in this, maybe you'll beat us, and then the last couple of games they shut the door on them. That's what that's what Carolina did to Vegas. Vegas finally got a little taste of their own medicine in the Stanley Cup final.
I think the difference in those series and the way that Carolina did it, Carolina was, they were the more skilled and they were the faster team in the Stanley Cup final. I think that what happened to the Ducks, what happened to the Mammoth, and weirdly, what even happened to the Avalanche against the Las Vegas Golden Knights was they wore people down with the physicality, and they wore people down by not letting them get the puck out of their neutral zone. And they found a way to kind of bully their way to some of this, and they had depth. They had incredible depth on that Vegas Golden Knights team. And the Carolina Hurricanes, depending on which lens you look at it, there's some encouragement to be found. Like, okay, maybe if Carolina can win it by being a little bit more finesse-centric and a little bit more speed and skill-centric, which is counter to what a lot of the conversation around what playoff hockey is, maybe, you don't have to overcompensate on bringing in size and bringing in physicality and bringing in these big bully bodies if you're the Utah Mammoth. I also don't think that there's any particular franchise outside of the building that this Utah Mammoth team is trying to model themselves after in order to build a Stanley Cup winning team. I think that what we have learned throughout is that there's a pretty sincere effort to commit to the vision that already exists with this Utah Mammoth team, with the sort of 8-year plan that Armstrong and company had in Arizona and brought with them to Salt Lake City. So I don't think that this Mammoth franchise is going to be prisoners to any moment where it's just like, oh man, well look, that this team did it this way, so we've got to try to copy that. There's been a vision, and that vision I don't think is going to sway much, especially given that the results are either on schedule or maybe slightly ahead of schedule, depending on who you talk to down there at the shops at Southtown, the practice facility down there, which, by the way, will be hosting a Utah Jazz draft party, which is now less than 2 weeks away. We are running up on some more interesting sports things here in the state of Utah. España versus Cabo Verde. Spain versus Cape Verde. 0-0. They just started the second half. Obviously, a lot of people thought that Spain would run away with this one relatively easily. So far, it's all knotted up. Both blank sheets. But Lamine Yamal, who we talked about, the 19-year-old megastar for Barcelona, who is enjoying his anonymity in the United States. He was not on the field at all, not on the pitch, I should say, at all, for Spain in the first half of this game. So if you're paying attention to the World Cup, something to note there. 877-353-0700. I want to know how your loyalties, your sports viewing loyalties were divided this weekend, because there was the World Cup to watch, and there was NBA Finals to watch, and there was Stanley Cup Finals to watch, and last night there was the UFC event, which was I'm very curious to know what kind of rating that thing pulled. We talked a lot about the spectacle, the pageantry of the Netflix card, where the largest streaming platform in the world was hosting an MMA event for the very first time, and it became the most watched MMA event on record. This one last night on the White House lawn, no less, was you cannot even compare them. The level of fighting, the level of matchmaking. I'll be honest, as the PFL guy, I wanted for there to be some kind of like fumble at UFC on the White House lawn. I wanted there to be some kind of like, oh, this is terrible and embarrassing. There were a couple brief moments where you're like, wow, I can't believe they're allowing that to happen. But the event itself, if you took it in as a sports event, as a competition, goodness gracious, it ended up being unbelievable, like glorious. Heading into the event, there was a lot of question about whether or not the matchmaking was going to make the United States of America look good, because American fighters were going up against really, really tough competition from other countries And, man, spoiler alert, the Americans came out just fine. We'll get to that on the show today. I want to keep the thoughts organized. The New York Knicks, for the first time in 53 years, NBA champions.
Are they really? I didn't hear anything about that.
They
from
closed
everyone on the national in the national media.
They closed it out on the road in San Antonio. And, look, it's easy when we spend an entire season in awe, and really it's been 3 seasons, in awe of and worshiping at the altar of what Victor Wembanyama represents and what this young roster for the San Antonio Spurs represents. So a lot of conversation is about like what they did not do in this series and the shortcomings, and I'm guilty of that as well. Friday I was talking about it. Thursday I was talking about it. But, man, the more interesting story here, I think the more fair story here is focusing on what the New York Knicks did in this postseason. What a dominant run through the NBA playoffs. What an incredible example of team chemistry and players who just know their role and embrace that role, and guys who previously in their careers, I'm thinking of like a Karl Anthony Towns, very easily could have been one of these guys that's like, I need to be more ball dominant. I need to be somebody who gets more credit. I don't want to defer to Jalen Brunson. I don't want to defer to OG Anunoby, who ended up being a much better player in this series than Cat, and Cat did a good job. You know, these guys, the Landry Shamets of the world, obviously have to play that role, but what a beautiful thing for the New York Knicks as this major market Goliath team to play and act like they were all just a bunch of, pickup game cats that were like, hey, I'll do whatever is best for the team. We do this in professional sports, and we talk about how much bigger and better it is for these guys to be in LA, to be in New York, and when we do that, we put this superstar lens on them. And because of that, I almost expect superstar behavior, superstar attitude, superstar play. Well, we got the play, but there's no attitude, right? The chemistry of this team was incredible. Mike Brown knew exactly what he had with these guys. And hate him or not, and you probably do hate him, and you probably have a good reason to, Jimmy Dolan, of all people, he said back in November, this team's going to win an NBA championship. And he set an expectation that was not completely unfounded. So congratulations to the New York Knicks. The city of New York thankfully didn't burn all the way down to the ground. There was plenty of tomfoolery, shenanigans, minor rioting, property damage, etc. But there was also plenty of scenes of just like jubilance and celebration and a very kind of normal reaction. People filling the streets, singing along Alicia Keys, it's Alicia Keys, right? The New York song?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Welcome to New York.
Thousands and thousands of people crowding into parks and squares and blocks, singing along to that, celebrating a weekend victory. The only thing that could have made it more epic, would have made it more poetic, is if that had been a Game 6 closeout at Madison Square Garden instead of doing it on the road. Plenty of Knicks fans did the actually very budget-conscious thing and flew to San Antonio to see a game instead.
And you mentioned the amount of New York stand-up comedians who probably live in Austin who just made the short drive, right?
Bunch of them, yeah. So there was a strong presence of Celebrity Row was like half represented.
Here's one thing, probably one good reason, probably that it was in San Antonio, not New York. Charles Oakley was in attendance.
That's good.
Did you see that?
Good for Charles Oakley. That's wonderful.
He was with the other 90s Knicks, Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Allen Houston, and whoever else that I'm not remembering right now, in attendance for this closeout game for the Knicks winning their first title in over 50 years. By the way, Jalen Brunson, I said Thursday, actually all week I was saying, OG Anunoby should be finals MVP, and that Game 4 should clinch it. Then Jalen Brunson had 45 points and was the only one who could do anything offensively in a very low-scoring, tight game, tight at the end game, another comeback win for the Knicks, and I went, okay, you know what? forget everything I said about OG Anunoby, all due respect. That one game gives Jalen Brunson the Finals MVP. And he had a good series, but that game surpassed everything OG Anunoby did, even the tip-in.
OG was incredible, and what OG Anunoby gets is he gets a ring where he was active. OG Anunoby gets a ring where he was a contributor. He was a big part of it. He gets a ring that he actually earned. He has a ring. He was like in the building.
He was on the roster.
He was on the roster, but
Raptors.
he wasn't playing for the Raptors.
Yeah.
So this and look, that still counts, right? Jordan Clarkson's ring with the Knicks still counts. He was not the impetus. He was not the driving force behind getting one.
Shout out to Jordan Clarkson, by the way. NBA champion.
Love to see that for Jordan Clarkson. You want to see these guys that are likable and kind of embrace whatever situation they're in.
And
you like
condolences to Kelly Olynyk
have
on the
some
other
success.
side.
Sorry,
great
Kelly
former
Olynyk.
Jazzmen.
But OG Anunoby now gets to wear his New York Knicks ring with a lot different mentality than he gets to wear his Toronto Raptors ring, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing. And Jalen Brunson, for what he is and what he was for the Knicks, to me, he probably would have had to kind of disappear down the stretch to not be given Finals MVP because, you know, people are going to be like, it's his team. And it is.
The star player, if they play even decently up to their standard, even if it's a little bit below standard, typically gets that nod from the voters. And I wouldn't even say it was below his standard. He was facing an incredible defense with the Spurs this series, and then Game 5 he went, we're winning this championship.
Yeah.
45 points. First Knick to score over 40 points in a finals game, by the way.
And a lot is going to be talked about this in an offseason when the the real headlines wear off. It needs to be discussed as much as it's going to be. It needs to be examined and written about as much as it's going to be, and probably even more, that Jalen Brunson did something that no other athletes do in the modern era. And he took a discount, especially a discount to play for New York. I remember when we were reporting on this, when we talked about this back in 2024. And it was like with kind of not disdain, but sort of a condescending way, like, in order to make this worth it, you have to win a championship. Jalen Brunson left $113 million on the table short of a max extension. And he did that because he wanted to stay in New York and he wanted there to be some flexibility to add pieces around him. And this, by the way, was at a time where plenty of us were questioning whether or not he was really the thing that you built around in the first place. Like, okay, it makes sense for LeBron James to sit down and declare, you're going to have to build around me and only me, so I'm going to make sure that you have some funds for that. It would make sense for Steph Curry to do something like that. You could make the case that even for like a Kyrie, you could make that. Jalen Brunson was not exactly the consensus pick on a guy that was going to be the superstar driving force behind a championship run, but he had that belief in himself, and he said, I am going to leave some meat on the bone that you can then distribute to teammates. It's not dissimilar from it is dissimilar in that we're talking about a non-hard cap league, luxury tax, things like that. But he plays for an owner that he knows is not going to flirt with that too much. So he was like, all right, I'm gonna do what I can to surround myself with greatness so that I can actually win a championship here. Different coach at the time, different everything at the time. But he had this vision, $100 million that could end up in his bank account, will not end up in his bank account in terms of NBA salary because of a decision that he made as a professional with a certain goal in mind, and he just achieved that goal. And he did it in storybook, poetic fashion, and he's going to get the credit he deserves for it. It's going to be examined by sports business insiders. It's going to be examined at business schools. It's going to be examined in leadership conferences. When you are willing to make a personal sacrifice in order for the greater good of an organization, even before you really have logical reason to believe that it will pay off for you, that is something. The movie will be epic 20 years from now when it debuts on Netflix Prime or whatever it's called after the the monopoly mergers.
YouTube, Netflix, Prime. Yeah, and the thing that you said at the end there, the movie that will be made, it's made because it's the New York Knicks winning a championship too. Like,
of course.
Like, if the Jazz win a championship with this core and they draft Darren Peterson and they do it 7 years from now and he's decided to take a pay cut on his extension, they're not making a movie about the Utah Jazz doing that. But because it's the New York Knicks, there'll be 1,000 books written, at least one full feature length movie. Absolutely.
If the Jazz did it before the Knicks did it, then there would be. But now that the Knicks have done it, it's like. And by the way, if you're an owner, if you're a GM, now you can't convince anybody else to do this. You can't. You can't go into a negotiating room and say, "Why don't you do what Jalen Brunson did? Why don't you leave us some meat on the bone here?" For an old veteran player, for a guy who's in his, early to mid 30s, you might be able to take that tactic. Hey, look, your window's closing. Why don't we leave $20 million off your contract so we can go out, we can get a Mikal Bridges type player? Why don't we do that and see what happens, right? Everyone else who's eligible for a max extension, it's like, yeah, we're giving you the max extension.
And the other thing that's at play here is there's like union pressure to take every penny that the team can offer you. So it's a big deal when you do this.
When players get a big payday, the guys around them are typically not jealous of it. The guys around them, they're not outwardly and verbally jealous with the media about it because they know that the best thing for all players, the rising tide lifts all boats, right? So if the level is set by what Victor Wembanyama is going to make, $100 million a year, then me as the role player on the team, I'm never going to make that $100 million. But as the salary cap climbs and as these players justify the salaries that they've got, now me as a guy who's given you 11 minutes off the bench, my $19 million salary does not seem that crazy by comparison.
Yeah, it's like you earn an extra 20 to 30 million as the obscure role player when the market is completely reset and a record-breaking deal is made. So that's the other thing that makes this significant. The other thing I'll say about this is it's not completely unprecedented in the NBA. Tim Duncan did it for years, which is part of the reason why they had as long of a dynasty as they had in San Antonio. Dirk Nowitzki followed Tim Duncan's lead in the twilight of his career as well. So
those are good points. Yeah. And what I want to argue, not even argue, but what I would point out is that it made logical sense for Tim Duncan to do that, right? Because he's in an organization that has championship credentials, recent championship credentials. He's playing for a championship
diamonds
coach.
In the rough all the time.
He's looking at his teammates and he's saying, well, we already have championship caliber guys. When Tim Duncan was doing some of this, it wasn't necessarily about player acquisition elsewhere. It was about making sure that you didn't lose Manu Ginobili, you didn't lose Tony Parker. You already had it. And when you have that stuff, it's kind of like when Tom Brady and the Patriots were making their sort of like their contract loopholes when they were figuring these I'm going to convert this to a signing bonus. Because Tom Brady's looking around and he's going like, well, I've got one of the best coaches in the game. I'm the best quarterback in the game. I've got the best tight end in the game.
I've always got a top defense because of my great defensive-minded head coach.
And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to defer some of my salary to a bonus or something like that so Gronk doesn't go play for the Arizona Cardinals. And that happened over and over again. And Tom Brady was never the highest earning guy in the league. That's one thing. And Jalen Brunson is never going to be the highest earning guy in the league. Right now, today, Jalen Brunson is probably the most respected guy in the NBA because we're all prisoners of the moment. Jalen Brunson is a guy that right now is basking in this glory of you are the ultimate star, the ultimate driving force, the ultimate teammate. You're the ultimate everything right now. They're comparing him to Kobe right now. Jalen Brunson isn't Kobe Bryant. He's never going to be Kobe Bryant. He's drawing those comparisons right now because he was the catalyst for the New York Knicks to do this. And he was the catalyst for the New York Knicks to do this all throughout the final series, all throughout the season. But he was actually the catalyst for the New York Knicks to do this when he became a New York Knick. And 2 years ago when he signed an extension that he left over $100 million on the table so that they could go get Karl Anthony Towns. And that's where it differs from Tim Duncan, and that's where it differs from Dirk Nowitzki, because he's a guy who's just like, I believe this is going to work. I believe if I do the right thing, it's going to come back, what he perceived to be the right thing. Plenty of other players did not believe that that was the right thing for Jalen Brunson to do. Like, the group thread of all the NBA All-Stars, I promise you, was just like, what are you doing, idiot?
Yeah, because it's, like I said, the union pressure it's always us against management. It's always us against the owners. We can't afford to let them keep a penny that we should have.
And by the way, you're playing for Jimmy Dolan, who is notoriously cheap and notoriously moronic when it comes to player ownership relations, owner, fan, player, triumvirate relations. That love triangle has been dysfunctional for decades because of Jimmy Dolan, right? So the act of good faith, you had no reason to act in good faith if you're Jalen Brunson. If anyone else was going to be like, well, I could leave, like if you were playing for San Antonio and you're just like, all right, $100 million, I could leave $100 million on the table. If you're playing for the Utah Jazz, I could leave $100 million on the table, and I'm going to get a good faith reassurance from the Angels that they are going to spend that money in order to support me, and I can believe that. Jalen Brunson in 2024 had no reason to believe that what he was leaving on the table was going to be anything but more lining for Jimmy Dolan's billionaire pockets. But he made the move because he believed. And that is something that should be talked about, should be written about, should be celebrated, and it's going to be. And I can't wait for this Ben Stiller documentary to come out and for Jalen Brunson to do a Last Dance style sit down interview and tell the real truth of what his thought process was back in 2024 when he made that decision, and the ultimate relief and joy he must have felt in 2026 when that vision came to fruition, when his belief that it could work out for him actually happened. What a story. Even if this was the Utah Jazz, this would be such a Hollywood Cinderella notebook. What the heck? How am I supposed to believe in this level of romance in modern day sports? But the fact that it's also the New York Knicks, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that guarantees that there's going to be a movie about it, in addition to the probable, the rumored Ben Stiller documentary that he's been supposedly filming from the sideline all playoffs long. Yeah, it's an incredible story. I'm annoyed at the obnoxious New York Knicks fans. I can't. I got to be honest about that. I like this Knicks team despite the Knicks fan base I found myself, and despite Jim Dolan.
Yeah.
But it's fun to see a team like this who play in a big the biggest market, in all of the world, in the entire country. Play like plucky underdogs. Play the way that the Jazz have needed to play to be championship contenders, particularly in the 90s when it comes to the Jazz, and actually get it done. Like that should give you some hope if you're a small market NBA fan like here in Salt Lake City, even though they have a significant advantage because they play in New York City. But yeah, it's a fun story. Happy for the few Knicks fans I actually like.
And San Antonio Spurs.
Shout out to Porter Larson.
Woof.
Yeah,
double-digit lead in all 5 games.
16-point lead again in Game 5. I'm watching it going, if they blow this one, and they did.
Victor Wembanyama,
incredible.
You truly are an alien life form, but his body is preternatural, is supernatural. It's out of this world. Turns out that brain-wise, he's very mortal as a basketball player.
He wasn't OC, he wasn't ready for the moment, and the team wasn't ready for the moment. And I saw that immediately when he threw that pass to Jalen Brunson at the end of game 2, when they had a chance to take the lead, win the game, or at least make it go to overtime there if they're not able to win. As soon as that, I went, oh, this is where this young team and their young superstar is not ready for the moment in these playoffs. It was shocking because they'd gotten so far before we saw anything like that.
We saw glimpses of it in the Oklahoma City series, but the difference was the rebound. The difference was the bounce back.
There wasn't as many clutch mess ups in that game, in that series either. There was a lot of trading of blowouts. The first game was awesome. The last game was awesome in that series. There weren't a lot of opportunities for him to make those kind of mental mistakes in the clutch. And so those were glaring in this series for him.
Now, here's the silver lining if you're a San Antonio fan, and here's the unfortunate thing if you're a Utah Jazz fan. It's very normal. It's very acceptable, predictable for or a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old to make those kind of mistakes. It's very normal for a second-year head coach who's really kind of a first-year head coach to be making those kind of mistakes or not ready for that moment. San Antonio's going to be ready for that moment. Victor Wembanyama's going to be ready for that moment probably next year, maybe the year after. Or we're going to have to listen to Skip Bayless attach the non-clutch gene to Victor Wembanyama for the next decade. All right, I'm over time here. I got to take a break. We're going to come back with Spencer Warren, the Gov, talking what else? World Cup soccer, brought to you by Beer Bar. U.S. men's national team off to a hot start. Can they continue it this week? It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. 75th minute. Spain and Cape Verde are still knotted up at 0-0. To the surprise of many watching this 2026 North American World Cup. Joining us to talk about that, and of course the U.S. men's national team's strong debut, the Gov, Spencer Warren, and this conversation brought to you by Beer Bar, your home for all World Cup soccer broadcasts. Head over there to Beer Bar, drink and food specials for every one of the matches, and you've got a day full of them here on a Monday. Gov, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, man. How are you?
I am, for the next couple of weeks, I am a soccer diehard. Much like the Olympics, I become just completely enamored with it, and then I'll forget about it for 4 years. But I love what we're seeing so far, and obviously that love is strengthened by the fact that the U.S. men's national team came out strong with 4-1 victory over Paraguay. How should I be viewing that, Spencer, as the resident expert who actually knows what he was watching? Is that as strong of a win as it looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really, really impressed by them. I've been impressed with the U.S. Over recent months under Mauricio Pochettino. It was a bit of a rocky start under his stewardship, but they've settled into a formation. Everybody seems to know what their job, and their energy on Friday night against Paraguay was phenomenal, or Thursday night, sorry, was phenomenal and well deserved. Very excited. It was really important that the host nations got off to a good start, I feel, to create the excitement. And both Mexico and more so the U.S. Did that with aplomb. And so it's very, very exciting. It's been a really, really outstanding start to the tournament as well.
So all of us uninitiated were like, okay, that's 4-1's a big win. But how good is Paraguay? Because they don't have the name recognition of a Spain, of a France, of a Germany, of a Brazil, or an Argentina. But when we're setting the level, when we're checking the level of Paraguay, as people who have not watched Paraguay, where do they belong in those conversations?
Well, I always felt like Paraguay would struggle to get out of this group. I think Australia, much like the U.S., incredible athletes and just work incredibly hard like the U.S. did. We already saw that, and then we saw Australia do that against Turkey, which was a surprise for me because I thought Turkey would be the ones that would be top in the group. So, yes, when it comes to Paraguay, I always felt like they would struggle to get out of the group, but it's the World Cup. Anything can happen. And the U.S. put down the marker. I felt like the pressure was on the U.S. to get off to a good start in front of their own fans, in front of 70,000 people, really just cheering. And, obviously it was a home crowd. So the pressure was all on the U.S., and I felt they dealt with it brilliantly. It only bodes well for the World Cup. When the host nations do well, it creates an atmosphere, a magic that the whole country can get behind. And for the folks that are just like you, watch it every 4 years. It can leave a lasting impression, especially when you're hosting it and doing such a good job in hosting this wonderful tournament.
Balogun with his brace in the first game, and it gets, the spotlight shined on him. There's a lot of that conversation is, hey, he chose to play for Team USA. He could have been with, I think he was eligible to play for England, right? He's also eligible to play for Nigeria. I don't know how appealing Nigeria would be as someone who's trying to compete in this World Cup. I don't know what the pros and cons are of competing for Nigeria, but would he have been in serious consideration for the England squad had he elected to represent England?
Well, England actually struggle for number 9s. Obviously, Harry Kane is Harry Kane. He's a wonderful player. But after that, there's some good players, but he was certainly been in been looked at, particularly because he's playing his football in Europe as well already. Maybe he would have got a move to England because he chose to play for England. It might have been an option to have a homegrown player, which is a thing in Europe that you need. Well, it is everywhere, but they are at a premium. especially ones that perform on the international stage. So, yes, I think it might have been on the outside looking in. I think his home is definitely with the U.S., and that's probably why he chose that. And you're seeing the benefits of that. The young players or the guys that are in their mid to late 20s that have been around the squad for a fair few years, they just look accustomed, especially to this tournament.
The Gov, Spencer Warner, our guest here, talking some World Cup soccer here on the Sean O'Connell Show. These conversations brought to you by our friends over at Beer Bar. And look, I love picking the brain of soccer diehards because, I get to learn. And I watched that game, and I saw the early scoring, and then I saw the rest of it. And I'm like, okay, I think that makes sense to me. I think I know why that goal came to fruition, but it's just I think. It's not an I know. So if I'm asking you, what was it that the U.S. men's national team did against Paraguay that led to those 4 goals? Did they set them up similarly? Was it the ball movement? Was it the possession in their own zone? What was it that allowed them to be so efficient and so proficient with their scoring in a 4-1 start to this World Cup?
Well, first and foremost, I think they fed off the crowd. The noise that the fans created, it was really wonderful to, I kept turning the TV up so I could hear everything. And I think they really feed off of that. And I think Americans in general, to make a sweeping statement, when they get the crowd on side and they are diehard fans and well educated at this point, you feed off of that energy. It was the energy of the players as well. They moved the ball quickly. They were building purposefully when they had the ball. And when they were getting turnovers deep in their own half, they were moving the ball quickly forward, hitting Paraguay on the counterattack. And I just felt like the defensive shape was very good and gave the U.S. a platform to build from, which was really important. Able to break up play and let your attacking players, your flair players, do the business. And we saw that with Christian Pulisic. Obviously goes off at halftime, but that first 45 minutes that he played, he was almost unplayable. They couldn't deal with his pace, and him being direct, and then providing opportunities for his attacking core, it was just an awesome first 45 minutes. That's where the damage was done.
Next up is the Australia team that you already mentioned, also holding 3 points after they beat Turkey. What's that match going to look like for the U.S. men's national team?
It's going to be a physical battle. What Australia lack in technical ability, they make up for in fitness levels. Excuse me. They're going to be a real tough and a different type of issue for the U.S. They're probably going to have to be a little bit more patient. They're more than likely going to have the majority of possession because under Pochettino, he likes to have the ball. But they are going to have to be patient. It's going to be a real physical, bruising battle. As we know with the Aussies, if you've ever watched them play cricket or rugby, they are competitors. And as I said, with the maybe lesser amount of technical ability, where a lot of their players are still playing, or some of their players are still playing in Australia, and the U.S. having the luxury of having the majority of their squad playing in Europe and around the world, there's a little bit more know-how. But I'm excited for this matchup up in Seattle. It's a good crowd, wonderful stadium. And again, I think I have to give props to all the nations that are hosting. These stadiums look wonderful. And yes, maybe there's a couple of empty seats here and there, but that's just, me having a little dig at FIFA there with the pricing and whatnot.
Well,
it's been a wonderful occasion so far.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because obviously, SoFi when Team USA is playing is going to be full and loud and crazy. But we saw a couple of games where it seems like the prohibitive pricing maybe emptied some seats that otherwise would have been full, and that very much is a FIFA thing. That very much is a pricing thing, in my opinion. And we talked about it in the run-up to this World Cup, how insane it is to price your fans out of attendance at this ultimate celebration of world sport. I don't anticipate that FIFA will make any downward adjustments in pricing, but is there a lesson to be learned here by some of those empty seats?
Maybe a little bit, but again, I'm not a huge fan of the federation itself. I think it's become an apparent, more and more money driven. We've seen that with the hydration breaks and the commercials. It feels like it's a ploy, especially with a lot of these closed roof stadiums where they have the climate control, where you don't need the hydration break. I get it for the open air stadiums where it is hot and humid, and especially my English lot, they're not used to that kind of heat. But at the same time, we've got to roll with it. I'm hoping that the secondary market becomes a little bit more attainable for those soccer fans that maybe want to catch a game here and there and experience the World Cup vibe. We've seen it in all the stadiums, though. Even though there's been a few empty seats, how wonderful the fans have turned up and made it a real party atmosphere in all the stadiums so far. And it's looked wonderful. I just hope that it continues and we get some of those empty seats filled up.
What other squads or what other results have caught your attention so far in the early play?
Well, I know this will go against the grain because I know you Americans can't stand a tie, but I loved the Brazil-Morocco game, and I loved the Netherlands and Japan game. I thought those were two really excellent games that the teams took a point each. But yeah, I think there's been so much fun, and obviously we're watching Cape Verde against Spain, holding them 0-0 still with 5 minutes left or 4 minutes left in injury time. It's a great story. Curacao yesterday getting the equalizer against Germany. I know it went all wrong after then, but it was a delight to watch these small nations and how much it means to their fans, those small pocket of fans that are in the stadium and able to travel. I can only imagine what it's like in their home countries watching these guys do them proud.
Well, I think what we're seeing is happily the U.S. sports market kind of being swept up in the excitement of this World Cup, and I only anticipate that building more if the U.S. men's national team can continue with some good results. So fingers crossed for that. We're enjoying it so far, and can't tell you how much I appreciate you lending some perspective, an informed perspective for once on soccer on this show. Thank you, Gov.
Oh, always a pleasure, guys.
That's Spencer Warren, the Gov. World Cup insider, one of our World Cup insiders we're going to be picking the brains of during this incredible tournament, brought to you by our friends over at Beer Bar. Spain, Cape Verde in progress right now. Under 3 minutes now remaining as it is locked up 0-0, 0-0, as they like to say in the soccer world. There will be some stoppage time after that. And they've been long. A lot of these World Cup games, it's been like 5 and 6 minutes of stoppage time in every half. So
just missed.
Yeah, great chance.
A go-ahead goal for Spain there.
Great scoring chance, just missed. Well defended, actually.
Just over the top of the goal there. By the way, Cape Verde making you look good. You picked them to win the group.
I told them.
I mean, it happened to be because I picked Spain already, but
you
still.
Don't know. You don't know that. Maybe I was going to pick them anyway. Yeah, shout out to the Cape Verdeans.
I'm feeling nervous because Spain's my team to win this group.
So
seemed obvious, but Cape Verde playing well.
Where do you think Cape Verde ranks population-wise among all the teams that are in the World Cup this year?
World Cup population game?
Little trivia.
Are they second to last? Second lowest?
Who would be the smallest?
I don't know, Curacao or something?
You're correct.
Oh!
Curacao is the smallest nation. Well done, James.
I was just being modest when I said I don't know.
Yeah.
I did know. Apparently I did know.
Okay. All right. Great stuff from the Gov. Look, there's plenty of sports to talk about, but we have got to get into a little wildlife discussion. James and I, we have a great working relationship. We have a good working friendship here. We got a good friendship here. We leave each other alone for the most part when we're not working because we talk so much every day, right? I mean, I talk to James more than I talk to my wife. So we don't text back and forth all that much. We don't call each other all that much. I got a very strange text message from James this past weekend. I remember he took the Friday show off for a little deserved break, and I'm going to let James explain the content of his messages and what the heck was going on, because it was odd. And all of you probably have a story similar to this one. I want you to hear his story, then share yours at 877-353-0700. Hot Lunch is coming on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Eight zero one 850-9100. 801-850-9100. That is the phone number for Advanced Window Products. You've heard me talking about them for 2 years now. A lifetime warranty on windows that are made, measured, installed, and warrantied right here in the state of Utah, right here in Salt Lake City. No middleman markup, no runaround. If you have any problems with the measurement, the sales, the install, the window coverings you want to cover the brand new windows with, they do it all in-house. And it's people that you know and people that you trust. It's Nate Orchard. It's Jake Weber. They've been part of the ESPN 700 family for a long time. They've been part of the Utah football family for a very long time. And Nate especially, he takes the meticulousness, the craftsmanship, the work ethic that allowed him to be one of the best Utes that you've seen play. All of that work ethic and all that focus he now puts into this business. That constant need for improvement that made him a great football player and allowed him to have a healthy NFL career now is applied to advanced window products. AdvancedWindows.com, 6 to 8 weeks from the time you make that call to when you have brand new windows in your house, making your home more energy efficient. They have financing options. Depending on how many windows you're putting in, you might just be able to offset the cost of your windows entirely with the energy savings and then the payment plan. Don't take my word for it. Just give them a call. 801-850-9100. That's how you get a hold of them. Tell them OC sent you. 0-0 final. Spain, Cape Verde. That is a draw. That is a tie. That is a massive win for the tiny island nation of Cabo Verde. Congratulations to them. The mighty Spanish squad that a lot of people think is the odds-on favorite to win this World Cup, not able to get a goal in net against Cape Verde.
I mean, you don't have to brag about your pick to win the group. Okay?
I did pick them to win the group. I fully expect they will now win the entire World Cup. So here we are.
I mean, they're gonna have to take down my Jordan squad.
that was your pick. All right, James, set the stage. You took Friday off to go enjoy some much-needed summer leisure time. Okay.
Yeah, it was a bit of a it was a family reunion of sorts. My brothers and I, we have families now. Of course, we don't get to see each other a whole lot outside of like actual family reunions, and we decided like we need to just spend time with us. We don't need our great uncles, and that doesn't need to be the only time that we spend time together, right? So we decided let's go to Zion, camp at Zion National Park. We're all obviously from St. George, so spent a lot of our childhood there, camping a bunch there. So it was kind of coming home there to go on this camping trip. So that's where we were. Incredible, always fun to be in, encompassed by that kind of beauty that there is in Zion National Park, of course. But the story that you teased comes. I'm hanging out we bought 3 individual campsites that all next to each other. So I'm hanging out in the middle one where kind of the headquarters are, right?
Okay.
For
HQ,
us.
camping HQ.
Yeah. So I'm hanging out in the middle one with everybody, and one of my nieces looks over and goes, "Uncle James, there's a deer in your tent."
Okay.
And I look over, and it looked like from where I was, it looked like I even said it like, I don't think it's in my tent. I think it's just to the side of it there. I get closer. This doe has her head poked inside of my tent, just looking around like, what's this? What's going on here? And so the only thing I can think of is let me get close to it and try and kind of yell at it to go away, because we are all told that deer are very skittish. They're just going to run away if you get close to them, right, OC? This doe just stared at me, did not move. I'm going, hey, go. It just stares at me like, what are you doing here? Why do I have to listen to you? So at first I'm like a little bit nervous, even because I'm like, I don't know what's this animal going to do to me? They don't have horns, right? So it couldn't hurt me that much. Yeah, but I'm like, what? Like, is it going to charge at me? No, it just sat there, very nice. I had a snack in my hand, like a kid's snack that one of my nieces or nephews handed to me. So I happened to be eating this snack, and I noticed this deer's like trained on my hand where this bag of the snack that I'm eating.
What kind of snack are we talking about? This is
It
like
was a
pouch?
Scooby snack. You know, the little graham crackers?
Yeah, all right.
That's obviously a favorite of the kids there. They're like, hey, do you want a Scooby snack? I'm like, absolutely. I love graham crackers. So I'm eating this graham cracker Scooby snack, and it's just, I noticed this doe is staring at my hand. I'm like, oh, I wonder if it'll follow me because it clearly wants some of this. And listen, before anyone goes, you didn't feed it. No, of course I didn't feed the wildlife. I know enough not to feed the wildlife, right? I didn't touch her.
Look, there's not a lot of wild in the behavior of this particular wildlife
That's
right
true.
now.
But
okay?
like, there's
semi-domesticated deer is what it sounds like.
That's true. There's signs everywhere at every national park you go, state park, national park you go to, including Zion. They're like, don't feed any animals. I know enough not to do that, but I'm like, maybe I can use this to get this deer out of my camp. Sure enough, she followed me. I sent you a video of that too, OC. She just kind of very docile, very nicely just followed me away from camp as I walked her away. But yeah, the text I sent you was, I see your silverback gorillas in Africa, and I raised you a doe who poked her head in my tent at Zion.
You sent me like videos or pictures, whatever, that your family had taken where it's like following. You're like James. He left out the part where he was the tra-la-lying like Cinderella. He was singing like
yes,
Sleeping Beauty.
That's why she followed me.
It was
my beautiful voice.
James the Disney Prince. That's kind of what I was very odd. I was like, what's going on here? James, I'm not going to lie. Okay. I can tell you this now because nothing happened. I was anticipating that at some point I was going to get like the deer attacking you.
I told you for a split second, I'm like, while this doe is staring at me, I'm like, is she going to attack me?
That would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, she ended up hanging around. We're pretty sure it was her. She ended up hanging around the area where our 3 campsites were, like the rest of the night. Didn't get close to any of our tents like she did the first time when I approached her, but just hanging around eating the plants that were around our campsite for like the rest of the night. But yeah, these deer, you're right. These deer in these national parks, particularly Zion around the campsites there, they're probably no longer wild animals. They're probably partially domesticated because they just see humans all the time.
Wild stuff. All right, we got to get back to actual sports talk here. Isaac Shade's going to join us next. Locked On College Basketball. We're running out of time for the pre-draft process here in this upcoming NBA lottery where the Utah Jazz hold the number 2 pick. We've got some news on that front, and Isaac Shade will give us some insights on A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, and especially on Cam Boozer. The Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. We are, 8 days away from the NBA draft. Utah holding on to the number 2 pick. And we will be watching closely here on the Sean O'Connell Show to all the rumors, all the innuendo, all the conversations about who goes where. Isaac Shade has been paying attention to a lot of these guys that will be hearing their names called in the upcoming NBA draft lottery throughout their entire college careers. He's the host of Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Tar Heels, so he's got an up-close and personal look at Cam Boozer, especially right down the road, and Isaac Shade kind enough to give us a few minutes today. Isaac, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, Sean, I'm doing great. I feel like we're in a great sports moment right now. We got the College World Series, NBA Finals, World Cup, NHL play. Like, it's been electric, man.
It has really been cool. You're a basketball guy, so let me just ask, your broad strokes reaction to the New York Knicks getting it done, closing out in San Antonio and making it a 5-game win for New York, first in 53 years.
My broad stroke reaction is more on the Spurs side, where it's like they got to be kicking themselves, man. They had a double-digit lead in every game they lost.
Yeah.
It's like it's a crazily talented team, but they're young. And I just think they weren't ready for that moment. And the Knicks, maybe not quite as talented, but the sum was greater than the parts. And I also love what it says for college basketball to see Jalen Brunson, who was phenomenal, in my realm of college basketball, was overlooked, 33rd overall pick. And I think it helps as we're about to talk draft stuff. You think about somebody like Darius Acuff, another kind of undersized offensive juggernaut. I think that helps him long-term as NBA front offices look at his projections.
Well, that is part of the question and the thought process that I wanted to get into here. I'm a prisoner of the moment. As a sports talk radio host, I'm constantly overreacting to everything I see. Like, if the Spurs had won, I'd be like, just hold out until there's another 7'5" alien, and that's who you need to get, right? But the NFL is a big-time copycat league. The NBA, to some extent, is a copycat league. How much influence is what the Knicks just accomplished with who they accomplished it with? How much influence is that going to have on personnel decisions across the league? And I'm not talking about, you're not going to draft A.J. DeBonsa anymore when you have the number 1 pick because of what you saw Brunson do. But a little bit further down the draft, and like you said, maybe you give these undersized guys a little bit more of a shot, et cetera. How much influence is this Knicks win going to have on the league itself?
I like your point about both NFL and NBA and the copycat, because everybody's trying to figure out, what do we do? I'd even go into MLB when we hit the Moneyball era, and everybody's like, oh, we gotta pay attention to on-base percentage, And so there's all of that, Sean. Yeah, absolutely. I think another guy it might help is somebody like Stanford Zabuka Okore, who's undersized, and a lot of people might not have seen him as much because he was at Stanford and they weren't great, but the dude is so good. Or maybe even somebody further down the draft, like a Braden Smith, who's an undersized guard, but the NCAA all-time leading assist man, who's kind of triple-doubly every time he played for Matt Painter and the Boilermakers. I think it helps them. But interestingly, Sean, despite the Spurs not winning, I think to your point about finding another 7'5" alien, I think that's more the issue here that NBA front offices are still looking at is, while the Spurs didn't win, like, that's what we got to figure out game in and game out. How on earth do we contend with this dude who's only going to continue to grow and get better? And so I honestly, despite Brunson and the Knicks doing what they did, I mean, it's we could easily flip this, as you said, and be talking about the Spurs winning had they held those leads, had Wemby not thrown that pass into Steph Castle's back earlier in the series. And so I truly think Wemby is the bigger X factor that front offices are going to have to think about.
Okay, so against that backdrop, right, I'm not paying as close attention as maybe you are, but I don't recall having seen an obvious, 7-foot-plus freak athlete, ball handler, shooter, etc., in this particular draft class. And we talk about this draft class very favorably. This is one that goes deep. This is one where there's maybe a half dozen players that are going to be NBA All-Stars, and there's at least 3 or 4 that are being talked about as potential franchise changers for whomever picks them, but none of them are Wemby. So what when you look at this group, and it's the usual suspects, it's AJ, it's Darren Peterson, it is the aforementioned Cam Boozer. Do any of those guys make you, for lack of a better term, a closer contender to what the Spurs already have?
Well, let's go back to the mid-teens shot. This is where my brain goes with it. The antithesis or the answer to some of the way the NBA was going in the early teens was, oh, here comes Steph Curry all of a sudden, just changing how we think about basketball with the three-point revolution. And as we well know, that shot is a great equalizer for the length. And obviously Wemby can step out and do that himself. But I just mean, like, there's always these punches and counter punches and moves. And so while none of them, because you're exactly right. And no, there's nobody that you've overlooked that's like, do we have Wemby 2.0? No. But can other franchises zig while the Spurs are zagging? And I think the Spurs are set up in a great shape to, they and the Thunder probably oversee the West for a while. But if you're the Jazz and you get Darren Peterson here, assuming health and everything's good to go, like, is he somebody with everything he can do as a big lead guard that can get into a big guy like Wemby and take his strength away from him? Because what do you do against a big shot blocker? You don't let him get extended. And so can a guy like DP do that? And so I think that's what you try to do, is not to say, can we find some lesser version of Wemby, and say, can we find some best version of another NBA prototype position player? And I think a Peterson is that. I think AJ has a lot of capability. And so, yeah, I think there are ways to go about it.
How much should we be reacting to the news that Darren Peterson is not going to work out for the Utah Jazz in this pre-draft process?
It feels odd to me, right? We've seen players, agents, families try to force their hands at times of, hey, I'm not going to come work out for you, and so you won't draft me. Well, guess what, buddy? This isn't college, and you don't get to choose it anymore. If I'm the Jazz and he's the dude I want, like, sorry about you. You're going to come play for us, and you're going to be a dude. But, like, it ain't nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, we saw when Eli Manning went to college, went to the NFL, we saw that kind of orchestrated. It's things like that. And with some of the way, it's just, if Darren Peterson had a normal college freshman year, I wouldn't think as much of it. But there's just been enough question marks that it causes me to raise my eyebrows. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And look, I've grown up in this sports market. I live here in Salt Lake City, and we have, right or wrong, we have this sort of like self-conscious nature about NBA players in particular. And to be honest, black NBA players more particularly. Do you want to be in Salt Lake City? Right? There was all this smoke and turned out not to be any fire with the Ace Bailey stuff last year, where it was like, oh, he doesn't want to be here. He's not interested in playing for the Utah Jazz. He only wants to be – and he ended up being great and being a great fit for the franchise and seems to like the community well enough, et cetera. And in this draft especially, you've got Darren Peterson is one of these top three prospects. The other two have very obvious ties to the state of Utah, and he is kind of the lone wolf that had, as you mentioned, kind of a complicated year at Kansas. Yeah. Where Cam Boozer didn't, AJ DeBonta did not at BYU. Right. Boozer's dad obviously works for the Jazz front office. Cam was born here in Utah, though he doesn't have like childhood memories of being in Utah. And obviously AJ DeBonta, like, that story has been written and told 1,000 times. So right. I have been talking about this for weeks now, Isaac, where I'm like, well, hold on. If it's all talent and you don't have to worry about anything else, sure. Then you go for the guy at number 2 that is best available. But in today's NBA and what the Jazz have experienced already with some of the top players they've ever had as a franchise, do you have to consider how much this guy wants to be here? Do you have to consider, well, we're really going to have to win him over? He might not like it. He might want to be somewhere else. He might try to force himself into a different situation. We don't want to be involved in some kind of soap opera right when we're rounding out of tanking form. So I've been speculating on this, and I want your perspective. If you're in that Utah Jazz front office, if you're Austin Ainge, should you say, all right, well, we think Darren Peterson is more talented, But Cam Boozer is the personality type and the fit that we want here because his dad works for us. He's got some perspective on this place. Or we might have to move up to get A.J. DeBonsa for the same reason. How do you react if you're in that Jazz front office?
It is funny that you've got Peterson sandwiched in between these two guys that's on paper make a lot more sense in Salt Lake City. You know what I mean?
Yes.
With AJ ahead, who was there for high school, who was there at BYU last year, with Carlos being connected to the Jazz, like either of those make a ton more sense. Obviously, if my memory is correct from last year, Ace Bailey never visited and worked out, correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, and so there is precedent of Austin Ainge doing that, but do you want to pull that trigger 2 years in a row, or are you tempting fates there? So I think you're certainly onto something. You mentioned earlier that in addition to Locked On College Basketball, I also cover the Tar Heels. So let me give an example of Caleb Wilson, and I'm not suggesting the Jazz should take him at 2 instead of Chicago at 4, but I just mean to say he's a kid who loves life and basketball and is a face of the franchise type dude, because his temperament, his personality is there. And I just say that to contrast him with Darren Peterson, where if you have those questions and you're going big certainty at number 2 here, I got to say there's a much higher floor with Cam Boozer, much higher floor with AJ DeBonsa than there would be, in my opinion, with DP, because of the potential issues with all these various things that we've just talked about. And when it comes to a Cam Boozer, like if you want to pick him second to the Jazz instead of Peterson, I'm not going to fault you in the least, because all that young man has done everywhere he's been has won state high school basketball championships, Peach Jam EYBL championships with the Knight Riders, which is funny when he was teammates with Caleb Wilson on that squad. I know that Duke didn't win the national championship last year, but my goodness, they're a freak miracle shot in the Elite Eight from making the Final Four. And then who knows what happens. He's the National Player of the Year. The pedigree of being Carlos Boozer's son. He knows basketball inside and out. And I know that the athletics and some of that, and I don't mean the A's, I mean his athleticism doesn't just like jump off the page at you like these other guys in the top 4. But how could you not, as a basketball person, just look at the tape, look at what Cam Boozer does again and again and again, and think, man, how could he miss in the NBA?
Well, that is, I'm glad you brought up the athleticism thing. We saw some tape of him at the combine where people are like, oh, geez, what? He doesn't exactly look all that quick-footed here. He's big. He's like a big kid, like today's NBA, when we're talking about perimeter defenders, when we're talking about guys who have to be versatile in that, and knowing what the Utah Jazz have already, which you do, like there's also that question. Positional fit is a big thing here. Who are you? If you're going to keep loading up guys that could be front court players, what kind of other moves do you have to make? Is Cam Boozer somebody that at the NBA level, with his body type, with his athleticism, with his foot speed, that you could envision being someone who's versatile enough to defend 2 guards on a regular basis?
He did have to do a lot of switching. He's not. I mean, it's funny. We made all that about his athleticism, and we saw some of his testing numbers at the combine be right there with the Caleb Wilson, who's viewed as a higher level athlete than is Cam. And he, Sean, what's funny about Cam is even where the athleticism falls apart a little bit, he's got some of that like YMCA, wily, crafty veteran vibe, where I'm going to trust him to do enough to make those switches and not get played off the court in those kind of moments. And I mean, yes, you do have to consider positional fit, but I always go back and forth. Top end of the draft here, it's, dude, I don't care about positional fit. I just want the dude that could be a top 50 all-time NBA player. If you think that's there, you just don't even think about it and you go get him and let the pieces fall where they may. But when you've got these 3-4 guys at the top in DeBonsa, Peterson, Boozer, and Wilson, if you feel pretty, as a front office, if you feel pretty similar about all of them, then there are positional fit questions. And at that point, you do say, what is our greatest need here? If all things being equal amongst these four guys, what do we need as an organization? And then you go after that. But I just feel like I'm always, I get that numbers at the combine have to matter from a measurement standpoint and a testing standpoint. But I always hate at both the NFL combine and the NBA combine when we let the numbers overshadow all of the tape and all of the footage and all of the winning and everything we always see. And yes, those have to balance each other out. But I don't want to let what happened at the combine, which isn't wildly negative, overshadow what I've seen from Cam Boozer for years now.
Isaac Shade for another couple of minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking a little bit about all of these prospects at the top of the upcoming NBA draft. What you've seen of A.J. DeBonsa, what we've all seen of Darren Peterson, and that does include some question marks, and what you've seen of Cam Boozer, is any of these guys worth trying to chase number one and trading away future assets or trading away an important player now to try to ensure that you can move from 2 as the Utah Jazz to get up to 1? Or maybe, some team further down the line, given how deep this draft class seems to be, is it going to be worth it for someone at 6, 7, or 8 to jump up into the top 3 to grab one of these guys?
I could see it going both ways, Sean, and that's what's interesting and what I kind of love about what I would call the sections of this draft, because I feel like being at 2 for the Jazz, like if you just go straight up and don't trade any picks, if you're at 2, you just take DeBonsa or Peterson, whoever's left. If you're the Bulls at 4, you just take whoever's left amongst those big 4. And then 5 through 9, we have this whole run of these 5 guards that is really intriguing to me, where I think each of them have unique things that excite me a lot, whether it's Wagler, whether it's Darius Acuff from Michael Brown, Kingston Flemings, Braden Burries from Arizona. I like all of those guys. And so there's a world in which I could see, if you're the Jazz, saying, if we're going to spend all this money on a top 2 pick, certainly A.J. DeBonsa has the higher floor than the question marks of Darren Peterson. As a general manager, you're always trying to say, like, I don't want to be the laughing stock of the NBA if I get this wrong. So there's all that. So there's a world in which you might trade back for one of those guards to maybe try to pair with Keontae or something of that nature. Especially if the right package is there and you get a stockpile of assets from trading back. But again, as we talked about earlier, with all the connections to Utah and Salt Lake City with AJ, if you feel so much more strongly about him than the question marks of Darren Peterson, it's hard to think about not trying to put together a package to trade up for him. And given the question marks with Darren Peterson, I would rather maybe pass on him and look silly because he ends up being a guy than the more surefire thing of a DeBonsa. And if it depends on the level of the question marks, how red are the red flags? I would definitely have cause and reason for caution with that. And so there's a world in which I'm either trying to trade up or back. And I think that's a very real conversation that I would at least try to have.
Apropos of nothing, do you have a horse in the race besides the U.S. men's national team in this World Cup?
I was born in England.
Oh, wow.
My parents were missionaries there, so I always cheer for Team England. Also, so usually my buddies and I pick our fantasy football draft order based on the Indy 500. We're each assigned a racer and whatever order those racers finish in. But one of the guys in the league used an AI tool to assign one of us we each get like 4 teams and created a whole basically fantasy system to create scores on that.
Okay. All right.
So I've got 4 teams that have been assigned to me randomly. Funny enough, one of them is England. So I'm like all in on those 4 teams, and none of them are America. So it's Team USA and then those 4 countries.
Who are they? I want to know where you're going to be in your fantasy draft coming up.
So those it's England, I got to find my way back to it. I just moved away from that page. Where to go? There we go. I've got England, Belgium,
Okay.
South Korea, Sweden, and South Africa. So I was wrong. I've got five
teams. Okay. All
and
right.
I thought I was doing well, but then I realized red cards are minus 4 points, and
what?
so South Africa really screwed me in that very first match of the entire
No.
tournament.
No,
Yeah, it was awful. What are we doing?
We're throwing a red card on your friend who made that system. That's not good.
Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, that's a fun way to stay engaged with the tournament. I like that.
That's right.
Smart.
I love it. How about, did you see Spain just tied like some random country
Cape
with
Verde,
like half a million people?
Yes, Cape Verde, little island nation, Portuguese-speaking island nation off the coast of Africa. Amazing.
Oh, man. That's what it's all about, man. The goalie is in tears because he kept a clean sheet, man. I know we love winning and all this stuff, but man, it's the people. It's the stories that we tell behind the games themselves. I'm here for it.
Absolutely. Isaac, appreciate your time. Enjoy the draft. We won't speak with you, I don't think, before then, but we'll catch up shortly after.
Man, that sounds great, Sean. Have a great week, brother.
Isaac Shade, host of Locked On College Basketball, Locked On Tar Heels. And look, we've kind of gone on this roller coaster with the Darren Peterson thing. I want to dive into, in the Daily Dump, I want to dive into a little bit more the news that A.J. DeBonsa working out for the Utah Jazz. Cam Boozer working out for the Utah Jazz. Why is Darren Peterson not working out for the Jazz? It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. valleyplumbing.com to make an appointment without even having to pick up a phone. The truck with the duck handles plumbing, drain cleaning, anything you need for your AC, anything you need for your ventilation system, anything you need for your furnace. Thanks, voice guy. Don't interrupt me. The Daily Dump brought to you by our friends over at Valley Plumbing. The never-ending saga of Texas Tech versus Urbody continues. I don't know how many ways there are to approach this without just me shaking my fist and yelling at the clouds like a grumpy old man. It's just crazy that this story has legs that will not stop. The PR campaign by Texas Tech is as abysmally bad as anyone could ever imagine, unless they're somehow playing chess that nobody else understands. They're just really bad at this checkers, it seems like. Well, Utah getting involved in the theatrics here. The Utah Attorney General Derek Brown and Utah Governor Spencer Cox have released their own letter, their own statement addressed to Commissioner Brett Yormark and Kansas Chairman Douglas Girard, showing their support for the conference's desire to fight the battle against Texas Tech. All the athletic directors, all the university presidents on that call last week said, we don't think Texas Tech should be playing Brendan Sorsby. Texas Tech countered with, well, if you try to stop us, we will pursue all legal action necessary to keep him on the field. Well, now the Big 12 Conference, with the support of the Utah Attorney General, thank goodness, has sought their own injunction against the judge who gave the injunction to Brendan Sorsby. So the layers of this onion keep stacking on top of one another in the most absurd and ridiculous fashion, but here we are.
I'm laughing over your OC as you say, we got our own injunction, and Utah, hey, we're going to write a strongly worded letter from our attorney to your attorneys. Like, my gosh, this is getting so absurd. And all of it because a single judge didn't recognize just how bad of a rule, like how bad it is that to allow a player to play who broke this rule, right? And then compounded on top of that is Texas Tech not realizing just how dumb they look, telling everyone that please don't criticize this guy. He's got a mental health diagnosis, which by the way, I'm gonna give Brendan Sorsby and Texas Tech the benefit of the doubt to say it's real, but it's not unfair to question whether it's real. I'll just say that. I'm gonna until we know for sure that it's not. I'm gonna say okay, he's a gambling addict. But it's getting so ridiculous.
Even if it is real, right? And I'm a skeptic, but my skepticism is inconsequential here.
Yeah.
Even if he has a real diagnosed medical condition, an addiction, it doesn't mean that there are no consequences in his athletic life. The real life consequences, by the way, are not even being explored here. Other people have been criminally charged for the same thing, for underage gambling, which he admitted to, right? We have documented proof that he was gambling before he was 18 years old, all right? That's illegal. You can't do that. Before he was 21 years old. You can't do it. You are not allowed to bet with insider information. You're not. Being a member of the Indiana football team and betting on Indiana games, even if you didn't bet against Indiana, you have material information that is not accessible to the public that is prosecutable and has been in the past. No one's even talking about that. And by the way, I think that's right. I think that's fine. I think that's good. But Texas Tech pretending that there's nothing to see here just because someone has a mental health issue. I've already raved for way too long on this show about the precedent you are setting if that is the message. Oh, well, as long as I have a diagnosable anxiety thing, or I have a diagnosable depression thing, or I have a diagnosable addiction problem here, well, then I get to do whatever I want. You cannot sanction me. You cannot punish me because now you're working against my mental health. And We have worshipped at this altar of preserving mental health for everyone in a way that has become, unfortunately, disingenuous. And I've said it before, I will say it again. I am sympathetic to and supportive of people who are really battling mental health conditions. It is a nightmare. It is incredibly difficult. It is something that hopefully someday modern medicine, the miracles of science, will be able to eliminate. Like cancer, I want mental illness to be gone from our society. We've become the boys and girls who cried wolf, though, when it comes to all this, way too often. And now you've got this political theater happening where attorneys general are like, well, here in Oklahoma and here in Kansas and now here in Utah, we are going to collectively wag our finger at you, Texas, and at Texas Tech University, which, by the way, the Texas Attorney General is a guy named Ken Paxton. He wrote a letter to the Big 12 last week saying, if you try to enforce your bylaws, if you try to enforce your conference rules where you can rule this kid ineligible yourself, even though the temporary injunction exists, well, now you are going to be liable. And now the Texas Attorney General's office is going to have a problem with you. I would love to know how that flies with TCU, how that flies with the much more powerful university in the state, the University of Texas. I mean, all of this is absolutely bananas.
Baylor and Houston are also in the Big 12 conference. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, they are all coming to this corner of Lubbock in Texas Tech. They are holding court in between the two targets in Lubbock, Texas,
okay.
going, this is our battleground, and it's like, why?
Let me get conspiratorial here, because I love to do that. If this would make perfect sense for Texas Tech, if and only if they had some sort of like behind the scenes situation going on where the Big Ten and the SEC have recognized Texas Tech is a big money player and is willing to spend and is willing to do whatever it takes to compete. And if the Big Ten and the SEC were like secretly on the side of Texas Tech and saying, hey, here's what I want you to do. Make a big stink in your own conference. Find a way to get into this huge legal battle with your conference and use that as a way to exit the Big 12 conference. Then this might make sense for for Texas Tech. But the SEC and the Big Ten were like the first voices to come out and be like, this is crap. We're not going to play you guys anymore.
Well, I mean, maybe
they could be lying.
Let's dig in a little bit further with your conspiracy theory, OC. Maybe let's stretch even more. Maybe Josh Brooks is telling everyone, do not schedule Texas Tech because it'll be really hard.
Okay.
It'll be really hard to get out of those schedules once they're like, we're going to play them anyway in a couple of years.
So just to make sure everyone's clear on what's happening here, Brendan Sorsby today is eligible to play because of the temporary injunction granted to him by the judge, the singular judge in Texas, blocking the NCAA for enforcing eligibility rules on him. So the Big 12 is party to all NCAA eligibility rules. They're also party to they can be held to the laws of the land, which this judge now says legally you have to let this kid play. So now the Big 12 is suing Texas Tech, who is threatening to sue the Big 12, who is also getting support from Kansas, Oklahoma, and Utah's attorneys general to, hey, if you want to get into a legal battle here, we're on the side of the conference, not on the side of Texas Tech. And it's unclear when there's like 4 other major universities and like 10 other universities in the state of Texas, how they're going to feel when their attorney general is in support of Texas Tech. Are we clear now? Are we see?
My head hurts, OC. And just an interesting thing, I don't want to get into the weeds too much with this, but an interesting thing about the Big 12's lawsuit, which broke today, that you mentioned in that tangled web of litigation, they're calling this, they want what's called a declaratory judgment that the First Amendment protects the conferences, the Big 12, their right to invoke its authority under its bylaws to sanction Texas Tech. did not know that there might be some legal ground with the First Amendment on this sort of thing for a sports conference. So that's something else that just stood out to me. That again, neither of us have any kind of insight to add too much to that, but I just thought it was interesting.
It's fascinating in the most painful and annoying way.
I haven't seen anything that's come out of this executive board, this president's meeting with the Big 12 yet. Have you?
No.
Maybe they're meeting as we speak. They were scheduled to meet today.
I think that probably this lawsuit is a product of the Big 12 and of Brett Yormark being told by the university presidents and by the athletic directors in the conversations that have already happened, like, absolutely, let's pursue this.
Yeah.
Which I want to be fair here. I want to be direct. I think this is a waste of everyone's time, because I think what's going to happen is Brendan Sorsby is going to be eligible, and this is going to waste time and money and energy that belongs elsewhere in this conference. I told you last week, and I'm going to die on this hill now, that I think the correct thing to do, because you're fighting this losing battle, I think the correct thing to do for the Big 12 Conference, for the University of Utah, for BYU, for Arizona State, is just to throw up double birds at Texas Tech and say, you are destroying our system. You are a problem, but we're going to beat you. We're not going to fight this losing legal battle. We're not going to let the lawyers determine outcomes here. You guys are making a terrible mistake. You are hurting all of college football. You are undermining the Big 12 brand. You are undermining your own university in the most embarrassing and disgusting way. But if you really think that this guy is the answer to all your prayers, and this is the guy that you are willing to sacrifice all your credibility for, bring it on. We'll see you in the conference championship game. Or we'll see you in the regular season if you're anybody else, right? And Brendan Sorsby, good luck to you, man. Like, genuinely, good luck to you. You are well, has there ever been a guy more villainized in a preseason in any sport, where you just know every arena that person should? I mean, Barry Bonds, Mark McGuire,
Alex Rodriguez,
A-Rod, like, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, the steroid guys are probably the only ones that might be able to relate to what Brendan Sorsby might be going through right now.
Like, I wasn't contemporary of Pete Rose. I don't think he was playing and he didn't have that kind of reaction.
Yeah, he wasn't a player, obviously, when he went through the gambling scandal and got banned for life. Like, so totally different thing.
I mean, yeah, like, I don't know if there is an equivalent, but good luck.
Yeah.
Also in the Daily Dump, Brian Windhorst is reporting that Giannis, the Greek Freak, wants to join the Heat or the Celtics. I think we kind of knew that already.
Celtics is kind of newer, but it doesn't surprise you. Celtics are a loaded roster, and they've got a championship pedigree. Why wouldn't he want to go there?
I don't know how the Celtics can pull that off.
Windhorst, so this was on Get Up when he said this morning on ESPN. So he mentioned the Heat and Bucks, as we've known. They've been talking for months, including at this past trade deadline, when it felt like Giannis was certainly on the move. They didn't get a deal in place though, so he's still in Milwaukee for now. But the deal no deal's been agreed upon between Miami and Milwaukee though, because the Bucks just don't like what Miami has to offer so far. So far, to make it even close to appealing for Milwaukee, Windhorst is saying they've had to make it they've had to offer 3 or 4 team deals. And what that speaks to is they don't like Miami's draft capital, is what that speaks to. The Heat have had to ask probably the Jazz, because they're always in on these superstars getting traded as a 3rd or 4th team, right? They probably asked teams like the Jazz to be like, hey, do you have a first-round pick that you can throw in here? Do you another anonymous team C, do you have how many first-round picks can you help us out with here? You'll get this guy, or you'll get these picks in exchange if you join this deal. So that's a snag for Miami. The Celtics, it's like these guys, they like to shoot threes, and Giannis doesn't shoot threes. And you'd probably have to send Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they've just won you a championship. They go to the conference finals almost every year. That's tricky for Boston. You would think it's an upgrade to get Giannis, but it's a lot more nuanced than that with the Celtics. So this will be interesting to watch as we head into the draft.
All right, that's your Daily Dump brought to you by our friends at Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. We are about 10 minutes away from Belgium versus Egypt. Coming at you from Seattle, Washington. Also later today, Saudi Arabia, Uruguay, and Iran versus New Zealand. So that's 4 American cities hosting 4 different World Cup games. Tomorrow's lineup is France versus Senegal at 1. That's actually, I'm glad we're going to be on air while that thing starts. That's going to be fun. Iraq, Norway tomorrow afternoon. Argentina, Algeria tomorrow evening. And then the late night game, Austria versus Jordan, which James will be watching very closely.
How can you go against Jordan in championship situations? My Iran team, by the way, that's who I picked to win their group.
All right, stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, remember James during these 3 hours, he's the producer of the Sean O'Connell Show. But all the other hours of the week, he is the program director here at ESPN 700. So he's the boss. I'm going to make a case why James should send me on remote to one of these World Cup games. All right, it's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, we haven't talked enough about the effect that FOMO has on any sports fan. I never would have anticipated fear of missing out to be this strong about the World Cup, but this is one of the primary functions of the internet these days, and social media in particular. It shows you things that you don't get to be a part of and makes you wish you got to be a part of those things. That's why people have body dysmorphia and think that everyone is in great shape because of the fitness influencers, and the mommy bloggers make us all believe we're supposed to have perfectly clean houses with 6-car garages and spotless children and all that stuff. And I don't fall for any of that, but I do fall for the FOMO I'm feeling when it comes to this FIFA World Cup that's playing out in American cities across the United States of America. The get-in price has come down dramatically for a lot of these games, as we thought that maybe it would during the actual tournament itself. And James, I'm starting to think that, we need an on-site correspondent for some of these games.
And that it should be you?
Now, I think it should be me as the guy with the most obvious soccer knowledge and direct ties to the game. Spence, despite the fact that it was a family business for the Checketts for quite a while, he doesn't really enjoy soccer the way I do.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. You definitely bigger soccer fan than Spence Checketts.
Absolutely, yes.
I think all of our listeners, the whole station on both shows would agree.
Okay, so I'm going to be realistic here, and I know that it's a big ask to say, hey, you should send me to this game. Now, of course, I will do my show from the road wherever we go.
From the stadium, you're 38th minute, and you're just talking sports.
Well,
people around you going, why are you talking so much?
I'm glad you have that idea, because what we could do, James, Friday, USA versus Australia in Seattle. That game, first kick at 1 o'clock Mountain Time.
Uh-huh.
I could just dial up the Zoom meeting on my cell phone, do the show from my phone while I'm sitting in a seat at Lumen Field in Seattle.
Bothering everybody around you. Stop talking.
Could you imagine how odd it would look to the sports fans filtering in to the Aussie and American sports fans at Lumen Field if I'm just sitting there silent for 3 minutes at a time, but then I've got my cell phone on. Oh, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell. I'm just shouting into my phone.
Why are you talking so much about Utah football in June at the World Cup game?
People coming up to me to try to have a conversation. Hi, mate, is that your seat? And I'm just giving it just holding up the finger. Shh, 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 shh. Don't talk to me right now. I'm on air. What do you mean you're on air? You're on your phone. I'm on air. Okay? James, this could be the greatest programming feat in the history of Utah sports radio.
I was going to mercilessly say, no, we're not doing that. I was prepared to do that, but now I want to hear. I think I do, and our listeners want to hear the arguments that inevitably break out, and maybe the fight, all the noises from the fist fights that's going to break out because of all the annoyed and increasingly angry Australian and American fans at you at the game. Yeah. So let you know what? Let's go ahead and do this. You may have to find a judge to give you a temporary injunction.
All right. Easy. That's easy. We've found out that's very easy.
Let's do that. The Honorable, air quotes, Kenneth Curry, maybe, in Lubbock County, Texas, could be your friend in this case.
Now, I'm going to need Broadway Media to fork out the $2,200 for the cheapest ticket at Lumen Field, USA versus Australia. Okay. I could find someone I could crash at their house. I could couch surf for this one.
$2,200 is the get in.
$2,208 is the cheapest ticket right now available for USA versus Australia Friday at 1 o'clock.
Didn't you say that prices were going down a few minutes ago?
Now,
my gosh, that is quite the number.
Okay, for some of this, if you want to go to South Africa, Czechia, it's only $350.
Okay, actually, you know what? That's now
below
doable
face value
for me.
That's below face value. You got to get to Atlanta.
Yeah, if I didn't have to pay for flight and hotel, that would be. I'd be like, I'd pay $350 for or two people, I'd pay $700 for a World Cup game.
Switzerland, Bosnia Herzegovina. That's in LA one. You could technically drive there.
Yeah, my Bosnia Herzegovina team.
That's that's $418 right now.
Harriman's own right now, Bosnia Herzegovina.
I think they're training in Sandy this week.
Are they in Sandy?
I think that's what Trey Fitzgerald texted me last week.
They are Utah's team. Everybody other than U.S. men's national team, we are all in on Bosnia.
Did you see, by the way, the beautiful way that the Algerian team has been welcomed by Kansas City?
No.
It's actually the most lovely thing ever. They're like a bunch of folks in Lawrence. They're training in Lawrence, Kansas. They're staying at a Best Western in Lawrence, Kansas.
They're training on the campus of Kansas.
And the community has just been like, yeah, this is great. And they're like wearing Algeria stuff, and they're going to the practice fields, and of course the Algerian players are feeling welcomed, and they're playing soccer with the kids, and it's just like this really like wholesome kind of vibe going on.
Kansas's own Algeria national team.
Kansas living up to, and this is actually something that I'm not going to get political here. This is something I think that we probably need on the global stage right now is the anecdotal stories going back home, right?
Yeah.
The people that are here for the World Cup and the teams and the sports federations that are here for the World Cup being welcomed, experiencing American community, experiencing American generosity. Because even here in the United States, if all we see of our country is what we get on the news, we can really dislike our own country. And when the international community, all that they see on the news is that like this tiny little sliver of over-politicized, militarized, like fanatical America, people don't really have a sense of what we are internationally. And that is maybe the biggest opportunity of this World Cup, is for people to come to the stadiums and be in awe of these incredible cathedrals of sport that we have, but also to have like American generosity, you know, like the
hospitality, all of that.
The German guy that is going viral for documenting his thing, like people are giving him a ride to the game. People are giving him a ride to the airports as he's flying, you know, like that's what we need from this World Cup. Is we need all these Europeans, South Americans, you know, African nations, all these people to go back home and just be like, dude, don't pay attention to the crazy stuff you see on political television. The United States of America, crazy cool, geographically interesting, but the people are welcoming. That's what we need.
Yeah, that is a cool story. I'm going to have to do a search there and find some of the videos some of the posts about the Algerian team.
There's some really wholesome stuff going on.
We're gonna and this week when we talk to Bill Riley on Friday, we're gonna have to ask him, so what's Olathe doing to welcome the Algerian team in Lawrence, Kansas?
That's all the greater Kansas area, Kansas City, the whole thing.
I mean, Olathe a part of that, as I understand.
Yeah. It's so I mean, James, just put it on the budget. Let's do a little on-site correspondence for one of these World Cup games.
You're gonna have to find a fan of Australia and be super nice American the way that you want. Actually, multiple fans. You're gonna have to find 10 Australian fans and go out of your way to be super nice American, and then we'll think about it. Yeah.
All right. Before we take a break, because the U.S. men's national team games are prohibitively expensive, if you're going to watch one nation, not America, in this World Cup, which one do you want to see?
I mean, for me, it's obviously Jordan.
It's Jordan. Because that's who you picked last week.
No,
it's the nation of Jordan.
I probably would pick Argentina or France because they have the two probably best players in this tournament. But
okay, fair.
But those are probably really expensive too. So I don't know.
My a couple of my high school buddies are in Dallas. They were at the Japan Netherlands game. Part of what's contributed to my FOMO. They went to the Japan Netherlands game. Great game, really cool game, and they're going to stay for the England game. So that's not bad.
Yeah,
pretty good.
That's pretty good too. Watching those three teams, yeah.
All right, dads deserve a day at Lagoon. This Father's Day, ESPN 700 and 92 on FM, giving you a chance to win a 4-pack of passes to Lagoon, the place where thrills, family fun, and great memories come together. Whether your dad's a roller coaster junkie or he just wants a day with the family, we've got you covered. Listen right here all week to score 4 passes to Lagoon. Father's Day fun from Lagoon, Utah's #1 sports talk. We'll give those away with trivia at the end of the show. It's ESPN 700, 92 on FM. Tom Callahan next. Stanley Cup. Lord Stanley's Cup hoisted by the Carolina Hurricanes. Sealing it in Game 6. To do a little recap on the series, and I guess on the season now that it's over, our good friend Tom Callahan, Locked On Mammoth, Utah Mammoth Insider, NHL Insider, here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Tom, welcome back. How are you, sir?
You know what? I'm in that same kind of weird mode that everybody's in. It's like sad that it's over, but excited for the off season, and a lot of mixed emotions right now.
The fact that Carolina did it and the way that they did it, what was the #1 thing that stood out to you in the Stanley Cup Final Series?
Well, I mean, it helps that their captain really picked that team up. I mean, for a 37-year-old guy who I don't think a lot of us were thinking too much about Jordan Staal and, that second line, but it really, and I'll even put a Utah slant on this pretty early in the show here, that is the blueprint for the Mammoth. Were they physically as big as Vegas? No, but they played harder. They were tough. And I was listening to some, breakdowns by various people, and I realized as I'm listening to this, Carolina was not stronger physically. They were not on paper the better team or the bigger team, but they were just tougher. Like team tough, more difficult to beat. And to me, that screams volumes about the blueprint for the Utah Mammoth and where this team, even as constructed right now, can head and become that type of Carolina Hurricanes team where, man, if they're willing to go through a brick wall and all charge in the same direction, they'd be a really, really hard team to beat. And that's just really what it came down to with Carolina, is they were willing to do whatever it took. They made it happen every single time, every single shift. They worked harder than Vegas did, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup.
So, in these copycat leagues, right, I was asking questions like this earlier about the New York Knicks, and is everyone else going to try to replicate what the New York Knicks were doing? And, there are some similarities between at least like the size, maybe some of the speed on this Utah Mammoth roster and what Carolina did. But did we see enough in this Stanley Cup final series to inform the way that other teams in the league, maybe even the Mammoth, try to approach the next couple of seasons?
Well, it's going to be hard because there's only one Rod Brindamore. And there was a good debate going with me and some of my hockey friends, and I've seen a similar kind of question online is, give me another coach that means as much to another NHL team. And I think, like, Brindamore just embodies what the Carolina Hurricanes are and has as a player, has as a coach. He is the living embodiment in the personification of the Carolina Hurricanes. And so it's a little harder to do that in Utah because there's only really 2 years of franchise history. But man, it's just him leading the way he does and him getting the buy-in he gets. There's no questioning that what Rod says they want to do, they want to accomplish. They look up to him as a player who won the Stanley Cup, and now, as a coach who's won the Stanley Cup, they believe, and they always have, in the blueprint. What they did a couple of things that we had talked about, just, being difficult to play against, but cutting down on the grade A scoring chances, taking care of their own end, and they just found ways to score goals along the way. And that's how you win. And they went and picked up a Stanley Cup. They won 16 games, and that formula, again, I mean, it just really, it starts with the coach.
The Utah Mammoth don't have a 37-year-old captain. They don't have a coach that won the Stanley Cup as a captain. And those levels of experience are in professional sports are impossible to replicate elsewhere. But, when you've got what you do have, and you have, Clayton Keller as your captain, you've got some of these guys who've been, they've skated in Stanley Cup finals. They've hoisted the cup in the past. How do you convey what it takes from the guys who've been there to the ones who have not? Even Carolina had to do that. Now, probably a little bit more direct when you're talking about Brindamore, but how did the Mammoth try to achieve that?
Sure, and that is why when we talk about, on this program, hey, this is why winning in the American Hockey League matters, a Calder Cup run matters, a World Championship, a World Junior Championship matters. You really can't replicate it playing games in the regular season. So there's a special thing, just a special, learning and understanding when you go through it. So that said, how do you impart that knowledge? You can talk about it. You can try to say, look, you can't imagine what it's going to ratchet up like, what that intensity is going to be like. But now that Utah's been in a playoff round and they played a very good Vegas team, and I felt gave them a good run. And if things have broken a little different, perhaps if they get past them, boy, we might be talking about a radically different postseason. But that's part of it, right? Is those guys who've been there said, okay, we did this well. We need to do this better. This is where the gap is. And it's easy now for Utah because their direct measurable was the team that went to the Stanley Cup final. So if you want to get to a Stanley Cup final, because once you're in it, you can win it. That is exactly what Utah is going to do, is look back at that experience and try to now parlay that into, okay, what do we change about our game? What needs to be better? What do we need to fix? And maybe, do we need to change some things about our game plan and the way we go about it? So I think that for the Mammoth, there's a lot to learn from the Hurricanes. But at the end of the day, what you're taking away from the Hurricanes winning the Stanley Cup is that they play a sound team game. They're deep from top to bottom, and they are just a very hard team to beat in any length of a series.
Because we now have the benefit of hindsight and we get to look back on the whole picture, how much of what Vegas accomplished in these playoffs was them overachieving through the playoff? Their regular season record was not spectacular, and especially in terms of direct wins. So were they just overachieving up until the moment that they couldn't anymore?
This is kind of the fun question for Vegas, isn't it? Did they underachieve in the regular season, or did they overachieve in the playoffs, or is there the truth somewhere in the middle? And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think they are a good team, and I think they did do well in the playoffs because the talent was there. Mitch Marner was awesome for a long stretch, although he kind of disappeared the last couple of games of the Cup final. But he carried them much in the way of Nick Schmaltz carried the Mammoth through some particular hot streaks, during the NHL's regular season. I think Vegas, number one, maybe they needed that new voice in the locker room, quite frankly, and nothing against Cassidy. I think he's an excellent coach. I just think that perhaps that message had probably gotten a little stale. It was falling on deaf ears, and it just wasn't having the impact and the motivation it had in the past. So you bring in Tortorella, who is a crack-the-whip guy. Walking in the door, you know what you're getting. But you also know as a player, he's got your back. So if you do what he asks, and he's going to ask a lot, he's got your back. And I think that freed them up to execute. And yeah, it sent a jolt of energy into that room, 8 games rather, before the end of the regular season. They won 7. And they got into the playoffs, got hot at the right time. Mitch Marner got hot at the right time. Carter Hart played well enough at the right time. They, for the most part, until the end when Carlson got hurt, they were injury free, or at least not so beat up that guys were missing games or entire series. So you have to have a certain amount of luck. I think Vegas is still a very talented roster. I think they're getting old in certain places, but I think that they just underachieved a little bit during the regular season. They bring in the new voice, and then, the spark might have had them overachieving a little bit in the playoffs. But certainly, no one picked them to sweep Colorado. No one. And that was incredibly impressive.
Tom Callahan talking Stanley Cup final, the NHL season post-mortem a little bit here on the Sean O'Connell Show. You mentioned Torts, and a week ago he said he's going to be done after this Stanley Cup final with Vegas, which that statement by itself is just bananas. You get the job 8 games before the regular season ends, you make this run, and while the series is still happening, you're like, I'll probably be done after this. I don't know why. But now he says he hasn't made a decision, and he's, the future's up in the air. From the Tortorella side and from the Vegas side, what is the correct move here with that head coaching position in Vegas?
I actually believe the initial intention was for him to only come in and finish up the year and give them a boost. I think that might have been the first agreement. And a lot of different people I know around the league have basically said as much. But now, if he wins the Stanley Cup, he walks away no problem. But now there's a sense of unfinished business. Now it stings. Now you lost the last 3 games. And now the competitive juices start to flow a little bit where you think, we could have done better. I could have won a cup with this team. And that's your belief as a coach, right? If you don't believe that about yourself and the team you're coaching, why are you coaching? So I think that maybe a little bit of that is kicking in. I don't believe that was ever the plan, was to keep Tortorella longer than get him through the playoffs. And Vegas is cocky enough to believe they should just win a Stanley Cup. That is that organization. That is how they treat things, which is really cool if you're a Vegas fan. You just expect to win. They expect to win, and they're cutthroat about it. We've discussed that before on the program. But I really think that the odds were that Vegas was always going to move on from Tortorella, but now maybe both sides are kind of looking at each other going, well, should we at least have the conversation? And I believe they will have the conversation. It was never the original plan. Could I see him coming back for next year? Yeah, maybe. I could, because I think he really worked some magic with that lineup. But I don't think that was the initial plan from the get-go. I really do think he was just coming in for the last, hey, get us into the playoffs, get us to the cup and win it.
All right, let's assume that is the plan. What's maybe a more long-term? Is there an obvious fit to be the next guy? If it's not Torts, is there an obvious fit to be whoever's next in Vegas?
So, yes, and now you're going to have me looking at this real quick, but I'm trying to come up with a name. But there's a guy in the organization who has, I think he's 43, and I'm trying to remember what his name is, but he's basically been a Vegas guy for life. And I think he's probably the direction they were looking at going in the first place. And now, because Tortorella, really what he did was he kind of threw, gas on the fire by saying, yeah, maybe it's going to be me, and when it wasn't going to be him. And so now that's why I think they've kind of looked at it, and I'm trying to look up real quick the guys and jog my memory. There is an answer to this, and geez, I wish I was better prepared to answer your question right now. I feel kind of dumb about this. And
no, you don't have. I put you on the spot, and the reason I ask is because there's a ripple effect in a lot of other leagues when a big job is open and there's a coaching change. If it's somebody internal, like you're suggesting, then that ripple effect is usually a lot less pronounced. But the follow-up there would be, if you're in this Mammoth organization, are you worried about, the Vegas coaching change potentially touching what you've got going on in your staff or your front office or anything else?
Well, I think you always might be a little bit. And I don't think that is a bad idea to think about that, because that is something where, maybe you think to yourself, well, you believe your guys are good enough, right? You always want to believe your assistant coaches are good enough to be head coaches. And I believe that in most situations, a team wouldn't necessarily hold a guy back. Now, actually, we're seeing Vegas do kind of exactly that to Cassidy and some other members of their front office by not letting them talk to other teams about openings. But I think that that's an exception, not the rule. I think if Utah, if someone said, hey, we want to talk to so-and-so, I think they would open that pathway for them. And that's part of the game. You want your guys to grow. You hope that you hire guys who are smart enough to all be head coaches. And that is exactly what you would love to see. So now, do I think anybody's going to come in and swoop on Utah staff? Not necessarily, because I think, honestly, there's going to be plenty of other candidates out there that will get hired ahead of that. But, maybe one of these days it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility that maybe in 2-3 years we are talking about, hey, is Utah going to lose somebody to a head coaching job somewhere?
All right, Tom, where does your sports energy go now that the NHL season is over? Is it attached temporarily to this World Cup, or do you just find crazy, obscure international stuff? What do you do with your hockey mind now that the hockey season has given you a little reprieve?
I absolutely am all in on the World Cup. I do love soccer. I actually got to call a couple of seasons of soccer in Nashville when I lived out there. I enjoy the game a lot. So that's going to be fun. And I hope the U.S. pulls it off and they look good in their opener. But with hockey, it's not quite the 24/7 news cycle of NFL football, but already the attention shifts now to the draft coming up and then free agency in early July. And what does the plan look like for Utah? So my hockey mind immediately goes into looking, as it has been for the last little bit, but even more so now, more intensely looking ahead to that. I will follow, soccer throughout the summer, and I am a big baseball nut. I know we never really talk about this. I love the game of baseball. So I was born and raised a Toronto Blue Jays fan, which is pretty foreign to everybody there, I know. But man, I love baseball. So to me, now it's baseball season, and I'm looking forward to tuning in and watching a bunch of big matchups. And I just love the game. I'll watch almost anybody play.
Do you have a horse in the race in the World Cup besides U.S. men's national team? Is there an obscure allegiance elsewhere?
Man, you know what? Like if a team like Ireland or Poland, which is, my family's heritage, would sneak in, I would definitely root for them. Japan's fans are winning hearts right now on social media.
Yeah.
And them drawing the Netherlands was insane.
It was awesome. It was a great game. A lot of fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, maybe I'll, pull for Japan. And then I always like watching the world powers, because some years they're not as good as everybody thinks they should be. And I kind of think it's funny to watch the meltdown around the national teams if they're not as good as everybody thinks they are. So, and maybe that's because the U.S. has never been a world soccer power, so I don't know what that's like. But I do enjoy following the big name teams just to see how it all goes. But yeah, maybe Japan. Maybe Japan's going to be my sneaky one this year.
All right, I like it. Tom, can't tell you how much we've appreciated all your contribution throughout this NHL season, and we look to continue that as we have more hockey to talk about sooner than later. Draft right around the corner, like you said. So thanks again for your time, sir.
It's been a pleasure, and I just want to say to all the hockey fans there in Salt Lake, thank you to those guys for tuning in to Locked On Mammoth too. It's been a great season, and absolutely looking forward to getting back at it in the fall.
Tom Callahan, Locked On Mammoth, NHL insider, friend of the program here on the Sean O'Connell Show. By the way, the way too early odds for the Stanley Cup in 2026, 2027. Carolina, the betting favorite as they open the new odds. Colorado Avalanche just behind. Tampa Bay, Edmonton, Minnesota, Florida, Vegas, Ottawa, Dallas, New Jersey, Anaheim, Buffalo, Montreal, LA, and then your Utah Mammoth. Plus 3,000 are the Utah Mammoth.
So wait, how far is that down? What team are we saying there?
You're about halfway. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4,
That's
5,
15 or
6,
16th there.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They're 15th.
Interesting.
15th in the odds. Right in the middle of the pack for the Stanley Cup.
I mean, I guess that's kind of where – I guess you could say that's where they finished, being one of the 16 teams that make the playoffs and they lose in the first round there. But feels like sleeping on the Mammoth a little bit too much. But, I mean, there's not a ton of reason to be like they should be a higher Stanley Cup favorite necessarily, but something tells me they're sleeping on the Mammoth a little bit, this sports books. 7th,
they're plus 1,400 to win the Western Conference, so 7th best odds in the Western Conference. And, yeah, that's how the sports book, that's how FanDuel at least has it right now. That was the first one that came up when I hit the Google.
All right.
The longest odds right now belong to the Vancouver Canucks. They are plus 40,000. Seattle Kraken are plus 25,000, and Calgary Flames in that same boat. So those are your prohibitive long shots. But
Pacific Northwest, not people aren't too high on those Pacific Northwest teams. I guess Edmonton's not in that group right there, but everybody else is.
Carolina, Colorado, Tampa Bay, your top three, according to the odds makers for next season. We'll be covering it closely right here on the Sean O'Connell Show. All right, I've done this on purpose. I have waited because I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. Last night on Paramount, the UFC hosted Freedom 250. If you did not watch this, I'm going to do my best to paint the picture. We have never seen a sporting event like this. Not just a fight like this. We have never, ever seen a sporting event like this. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, we're giving away some Father's Day Lagoon passes next. Dads deserve a day at Lagoon. We're giving away every day here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. James Peterson, did you watch any of UFC Freedom 250 at the White House?
I missed it. I was traveling back up the state most of the day yesterday. But,
Okay,
yeah.
Unacceptable, but also fine. No, this was – look, I told you before in the show, I'm the PFL guy. We're chasing this juggernaut of the UFC. I want us to be able to capture some of their market share. What the UFC put on yesterday, now – how appropriate it was or how politically correct it was is a completely different question. But we have never, ever, ever seen a sporting event like this one, a sporting spectacle like this one. It was an exercise in surrealism just watching it. Like, first of all, the ethics of or the legality of, like, gambling companies promoting their product on federal property, on the White House lawn, taxpayer funds funding the security, all that stuff is a different conversation entirely. You had a fight card of some of the top guys in the world. Like the first fight on the card was Steve Garcia versus Diego Lopez. It was the number 9 ranked guy in the featherweight division versus the number 2 ranked guy in the featherweight division. That was the first fight on the card. It was just all famous, dangerous people all the way up and down the card. Interim heavyweight championship in the co-main event. That was between a French guy and a Brazilian guy. And then an undefeated champion. His name is Ilia Topuria. He is Spanish of Georgian descent, Republic of Georgia descent. Okay.
Oh, he's not from Peachtree.
He's not from Peachtree. He is. He was coming into the night widely considered a top 3 active fighter in the world. Okay.
I do love that. Sorry, as on the quick aside, I do love the Republic of Georgia juxtaposed to the state of Georgia thing, where you have to, you're like, hey, hold on, I'm not talking about Atlanta.
I'm not
here.
talking about
I'm
Atlanta.
talking about Europe here.
I'm talking about the Republic of Georgia. So he's this. And by the way, he's like super handsome guy. Speaks perfect English. Speaks perfect Spanish. Speaks perfect Georgian, Russian, whatever. He's like this really educated, polished individual. He was also last night 17-0 coming into the fight. He was the biggest betting favorite on the card. He was like this huge, huge favorite. Lightweight championship of the world. He is a guy who moved up from featherweight. He vacated his 145-pound championship, so he's one of, I think, only 11 guys who's ever had 2 different championships. And he's just like this freak, right? He's taking on Justin Gaethje, who he's actually been on this show before. If you remember, we interviewed Justin Gaethje when the UFC was coming to Salt Lake. Spence also interviewed Justin Gaethje. He was the guy that they put forward to kind of do the promotion for that main event when he fought Dustin Poirier here in Salt Lake City. Ended up winning by head kick knockout. Like all this crazy stuff was going on, right? Justin Gaethje is an ultimate fan favorite. He's the human highlight. He was a huge underdog, and he was like America's hope for this card. Like all the other fights where Americans were going to win or lose were the American was the underdog, or it was American versus American, in which case it's a win-win or a lose-lose, depending on which way you look at it. But it was when it was the United States on the White House lawn versus another nation, it was always underdogs. Michael Chandler got destroyed. It was not ideal. Okay. Diego Lopez, this Garcia guy who's from New Mexico, he was winning and then got knocked out by he's Mexican Brazilian, which it's not like USA versus the world, but you want there to be a prominent U.S. win on the White House lawn.
Yeah, like when the event is happening on the White House lawn and it's named Freedom 250 as in America 250 celebration, it doesn't feel right when all the Americans lose, right?
And so you get to this main event, and Ilia Topuria is this polished 17-0 multi-division champion who in back-to-back-to-back fights has knocked out legends. And he's taking on Justin Gaethje, who is amazing, but a big underdog for a reason. And great first round. Second round, Gaethje is barely surviving. Topuria just demolishes his liver, hits him with so many nasty body shots, wobbles him with a couple of right hands. And this is after Gaethje's put in some nice offensive work. Gaethje barely survives and makes it to the end of round number 2, and then he takes over the fight. And for the next 10 minutes, we watch one of the most unlikely upsets in the history of the sport on the White House lawn by an American who is super pro-America. He's very just like support the troops. Like Justin Gaethje he's not the guy that you're going to have write any kind of dissertation to you. He's a very like red-blooded American, kind of like he was a college wrestler. He's a knucklehead fighter, but he's just like red, white, and blue all the way, right? And this dude comes through, pulverizes Ilia Topuria's face, beats him to where he can't see anymore. The doctor almost stops it between round 3 and 4. They make it to the end of round 4, and it's over. They're not fighting anymore. Topuria goes back to his corner. His brother and his coach are in his corner, and they're like, fight's finished. Can't do it anymore. I mean, I imagine he is sitting in a hospital today, or he probably got let out of the hospital because it's probably mostly superficial damage. But I would be amazed if his eyes are able to open at all. He was that swollen. And this is a guy who's been untouchable. And Gaethje just digs deep and becomes this American hero. He should retire. He's 37 years old. He should retire on the spot. He becomes undisputed lightweight champion for the first time in his career. He's a guy who's had great moments, legendary moments. He's also been knocked out in like some of the most heartbreaking moments. He's had this incredible highlight career. And to try to like even zoom out and understand exactly what this event was, again, it's on the White House lawn. It's military. The Marine band is there playing the walkout songs for everybody. James, when you're warming up in the bowels of an arena, you're in a locker room. They put wrestling mats down on the floor. Your team is in there with you. There's some folding chairs, or they're sitting in the lockers if you're in like a real locker room. You do your warm-up thing, whatever. Then you walk out through the tunnels, and you walk into the cage, and you fight, right? In this fight, they walked out onto the White House veranda, walked down the stairs onto the lawn and into the cage. They're walking past President, First Lady, the whole Trump family, every political dignitary you could possibly imagine. The wildest thing I have ever seen in my life. So fighters, you can't put all the fighters in the same locker room, right? So fighters are like, you 3 are in this locker room. You 3 are in this locker room. The guy you fight is obviously in a different locker room, whatever. For the main card, for the co-main event and the main event, they were in like legendary rooms.
One of the bedrooms.
They walked out of the Oval Office onto the porch and into the cage. Like they staged them in the Oval Office. You're watching Justin Gaethje walk out of the Oval Office into an octagon to fight. You're watching Ilia Topuria, who is not an American, standing alone in the Oval Office by himself with the cameras on him, and then the cameraman starts to walk backwards, and Ilia Topuria is walking out of the Oval Office to compete. It was bananas. Just this insane spectacle that belongs in a movie. And I wanted so desperately for there to be like, it rained. The card started late because of a rain delay, which, why? How are you doing this outside? I wanted that desperately for there to be like some, oh, this card stinks. They were all boring fights. It was the most theatrical, wild, unexplainable spectacle of combat sport I have ever seen. And it finished with this incredible American Cinderella story where a guy who is one of the most, he's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. He's one of these like beloved combat sports legends who's been through all of it. He grabs an undisputed belt for the first time in his career in a fight where he's 8 years older than his opponent. He's knocking on the door of probably aging out of the sport. He probably should walk away on this high note. I don't know that he's a smart enough guy that he's going to do that, but It was just, and nobody thought he was going to win. If you're watching in the second round, you think the fight could have been stopped like 3 times. Thankfully, the referee let it keep going because he realized the stakes of this thing. And then the wildest thing about it, he's celebrating his victory. Joe Rogan comes in to talk to him. And then the next person to shake his hand, and the cameras are just watching all this while the commentary is kind of like wrapping things up. He's standing there talking to Donald Trump, Melania Trump. His parents are in the cage with him. He introduces his mom to the first lady. She's like, "Oh, my mom's a big fan of yours." It's like, what is happening here? And the White House is in the background. Never again will we see something like this.
Yeah.
No other president would ever even deign to do something like that on the White House property. But the UFC of all things, MMA of all sports, like if you wanted to play a March Madness game on a temporary court set up on the White House lawn, they've done it on aircraft carriers and things like that. We'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. A baseball game out there on the National Mall, we'd be like, yeah, this is America's pastime. A cage fight on the front lawn of the White House, it was surreal. It was bananas. And as someone who's been like so deeply involved in this sport, I was just blown away by the whole thing. And the fact that it ended with an American pulling off the upset. And then his post-fight, he's just like, I was a 6-1 underdog. 250 years ago, the United States was a much bigger underdog than that. And, of course, all the military people in attendance were like, yeah.
Yeah, we were.
It was amazing. I don't – there's no point here. I'm just telling you, if you didn't watch it, find the person in your life that has a Paramount subscription and go watch at least that main event. And go watch just the complete absurdity and sort of like Simpsons episode wildness of it all.
Yeah, and you said it. Never going to happen again. Dana White said as much. ESPN published an article saying he's like, we can't afford to pull something like that off again. It's how he said it. But then he said it was an incredible success, all that stuff. Yeah, reading about the press conference didn't they do the press conference at the Lincoln Memorial?
Yes.
Pre-fight too. Like, obviously, we're not going to get into all of the potentially problematic reasons why that's problematic.
Look,
but it's quite the spectacle, that's for sure.
I mean, it is bread and circus like the Roman Empire. It is the
Absolutely.
wild. It is the wild. I mean, the flyover was just as visually stunning as you're going to find. It was the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, like in formation together, perfectly straight over the Washington Memorial. I mean, you're like, you could not write something more insane for an animated movie, and it was actually happening.
Yeah, you're right. It does feel very Simpson Family Guy-ish now, the way that you're describing it. And you know what else just popped into my head? So Rocky popped into my head a couple of times when you talked about how mangled this fighter's face was.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about Cut Me Mick. I'm thinking about the end of Rocky 1 or the end of Rocky 1, start of Rocky 2 when he and Apollo are in the hospital and you can't even recognize them because their faces are so badly beaten in. I'm thinking of that from Rocky, and now I'm thinking about the Living in America James Brown scene in Rocky 4 and how crazy that spectacle was, and that wouldn't even
not even close.
Be close to what this is, and it's fitting that would be a Vegas interpretation of what this was.
100%. It just go watch it. And again, I'm not the guy who wants the UFC to have this level of success. Like well, I guess that's debatable, but it was. I mean, there were some moments that were incredibly awkward, like at the start of the event, Donald Trump and Dana White walked out together, walked like this red carpet. And it was like
really far away.
It was like a 3.5 minute walk.
You're like, could you start closer, maybe?
It was so long. And you could see that Dana White was kind of having that realization as he's walking.
Like, oh no, we should have rehearsed this. Maybe time this in rehearsal.
It was, but there was some controversy with a betting question allegedly from somebody to somebody that looked like there was maybe some fixing but but go watch. Just either to laugh at it or to just revel in the most like stripped down, unabashed, just apostrophe America.
Yeah.
Just like like the most. It was the most. Simultaneously, the most sophisticated, complicated, expensive event that the White House has ever put on, while also being like the most redneck thing that could ever happen. And it was just glorious, man. I was in awe watching the whole thing and secretly kind of hoping for something negative to happen, and it didn't. It just was great fight after great fight and an ending that you could not have scripted better. Bananas.
We love our guy Justin Gaethje for
And
literally carrying the flag for the rest of the nation in that event.
he did. And double bonused. He got fight of the night and performance of the night, and those had been ratcheted up by some sponsor deal. So he got an $825,000 bonus on top of whatever he made to be the main event champion.
That's amazing. Great for him.
I think, okay, I'm going to end it here. I think what's going to happen, Justin Gaethje would be in his best interest probably to retire on this high note. It can't get any better than this. But Conor McGregor is coming back next month. He's fighting a guy named Max Holloway, who's a Hawaiian, probably my favorite fighter ever. He's amazing. If Conor McGregor beats Max Holloway, Conor doesn't have to play by the rules. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to like actually fight his way to number one contender because he's Conor McGregor. If Justin Gaethje just wants one more massive payday before he retires, he should be rooting for Conor McGregor to win, and then he should say, all right, I will fight Conor McGregor, and that'll be the end. Because the way that those two guys fight, they're both big-time knockout artists, that would be the ultimate sellout, the ultimate pay-per-view, which doesn't exist anymore. But it could be the big, big, big payday that would cap off what has been a great career for Justin Gaethje.
Help the UFC pay off their debts to throw this incredible spectacle.
Well, that's the thing. Dana White complained about it was like $60 million out of the UFC's pocket to put on this event. They get $1.1 billion per year from Paramount in their broadcast deal. $60 million is a rounding error for them.
So they're fine. I have an idea of how the PFL can try to top this.
Okay.
Independence Hall, baby.
They're fighting on the table where they signed the Declaration of Independence.
They are. John Hancock's signature is on the mat.
You know, I would love if combat sports did. So earlier this year, I don't know, people don't pay that much attention. Alexander Usyk fought Rico Verhoeven. So world boxing champion versus world kickboxing champion. They fought in Giza, Egypt.
Woo. Right.
The background of that fight was the pyramids.
That's right.
And then a couple months later, the background of these fights was the White House. You know when you were a kid and you used to play Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, and you would always be in these like crazy backdrops? There's like a volcano back there. There's dinosaurs. There's like, I want all combat sports to be this from now on. That's what we in the PFL need to do. Just be like, all right, we're fighting in front of Mount Rushmore, baby. Let's go.
Eiffel Tower.
Have it be just like a really cool backdrop every time. But apparently it's too expensive.
Oh.
All right. We'll give away some Lagoon passes. We'll do a little cross talk. It's the Sean O'Connell Show wrapping up next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Lagoon passes for Father's Day, 877-353-0700. If your dad's a roller coaster nut, well, he probably is in his 20s. Lagoon passes for Father's Day, if you can answer this question. Cape Verde played Spain to a 0-0 draw today in the World Cup. Where does Cape Verde rank in terms of population size in this year's field of World Cup teams? 877-353-0700. We talked about it earlier on the show. Where does Cabo Verde rank among population in terms of these World Cup teams? Final segment of the show is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100 for $2,500 off, 10 windows or more. Tell them OC sent you. Here in studio, celebrating a New York Knicks championship, Spence Checketts. Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Great.
Good. I can be the first to admit when New York wins something, it gets to be a little bit extra.
Sure.
Okay? So, and we're going to talk today about why I think what the Knicks just did is really good news for the Utah Jazz.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, if you think about it through on their entire roster, the Knicks have one, maybe two players that anybody ever thought was going to be like a legitimate star. One, maybe two. One is Cat.
Mm-hmm.
When Cat was in college, scouts were like, he's as unique as we've ever seen for a guy that size. And the other is OG. At Indiana, you know, with his measurables, big wing, won a championship, although didn't play during that Raptors run because he was hurt. The rest of these guys are cast-offs. Jalen was a second-round pick. Mikal Bridges has been traded 2 times at least. Josh Hart was almost out of the league. So, you know, up until this point, I think we've only had one example in modern-day NBA history of a team that's won a championship without Kobe or LeBron or Michael or whoever, and that was Detroit in 2004.
Yeah.
They won 15 of their final 16 playoff games, and their net was plus 283. That's an NBA record. Nobody picked them to win. I didn't think they would win because I'm a Knicks fan, and they never win. But most smart basketball people pick San Antonio. You remember, Sean, the Western Conference Finals.
Yes.
People were saying this is the NBA Finals.
That's the de facto NBA final, yeah.
So if you're a Jazz fan right now, there's an argument to be made that before this run, if you looked at the Jazz roster with the number 2 pick and the Knicks roster and put them together, there's an argument to be made that the Jazz actually would have had a lot of people pick their personnel. If San Antonio won, it would have just fit the narrative that, okay, whichever team has the best player is typically going to win this thing. But the fact that the Knicks just did what they did, I actually think it's really good news for Jazz fans hoping to see their day one day.
Well, even if you were just a fan of watching fun sports, it was a great NBA playoff and a really cool series at the end. And we learned a lot about what San Antonio still is not. They're going to be all the things that you expect them to be at some point. But what they are not yet is ready. And so it was cool to see all of this. And we had World Cup action this weekend. Did you catch any of UFC Freedom 250?
I heard you talking about it on the way in, and it may not surprise you to learn that I elected to do other things with my time.
Well, bad decision.
Well,
but
just real quick, Justin Gaethje, fan of the show.
That's right.
In-studio guest,
Yes.
saw the highlights of his fight. And then some of the other things that were going around social media were not great.
There was a couple of things that were super not great.
But as a fight fan, I'll cede to you.
Most of it was just fun to watch as long as you could get over the absurdity. And, like, I am one who's very successful at separating political crap from sports.
You have to be these days.
You almost couldn't because it's on the White House lawn, right? But as far as what could have happened there versus what actually did happen, it went as smoothly as it could have, I think, for the UFC, which might not be good for the PFL, but whatever. At the end of the day, it was just one of those things where you got to, like, if you can, go find and watch the final fight just because it was an unbelievable fight and it capped off a really absurd evening with an American, like, I don't know, Cinderella story, for lack of a better term. It was pretty neat.
Okay. I just wonder how many times Donald Trump wakes up and he's like, dude, Eric, come on, man. Like, of all the stuff that goes on in that whole group posse, even Donald Trump at times has to be like, dude, Eric did what? Will you get Eric in here again, please?
If you're wondering what Spence is referencing, Daniel Cormier, who is a multiple-time UFC champion, he is the color analyst on all their major fights alongside Joe Rogan, posted a text thread between himself and Eric Trump on his official Twitter account, with Eric Trump basically asking if any of the fights were rigged, is anyone hurt that we don't know about, asking for inside betting tips. And Corbier's responses in the posted thread were just like, why are you asking me this? This is appalling, basically. And then that tweet was deleted. And then everyone started being like, oh, that was fake. It was totally faked. And then everyone else was just like, well, how did someone fake a text thread between these two guys and put it on Daniel Cormier's account, which is possible, I'm sure. But in any case, it was that was one of the black marks on the night, if there is one. There's actually a couple more that, because I don't want to get overly political, I'm not going to get into. But for all the disasters that could have unfolded, I mean, if it had been a basketball game, right? If Donald Trump had said, we're playing Game 7 of the NBA Finals on the White House lawn, everyone would just be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
This is way too problematic. And the fact that they pulled it off is pretty remarkable.
Well, I'm quite sure that only the UFC would have agreed to do it.
Yes.
No other league would have done it. No other team would have wanted to show up, right? I mean, there was even a couple of MMA bros that I don't know that were releasing videos, like if they would have been invited, would they have shown up? And they said no. This is the perfect event for the current White House situation to have occur there.
Correct.
Our guy Shane Gillis was there. He was posting some pretty – I love that dude.
He's very funny.
So I did not see many of the fights. But, yeah, like of all of the absurd things that take place in the Trump family, the absurdity of Eric's decisions have always caught me a little bit extra off guard.
If you had told anyone in the MMA world 10 years ago, much less 30 when it all was beginning, someday – the main event fighters in a big-time UFC event are going to be walking out of the Oval Office onto the field of play, basically. Everyone would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's not even something you could believably script in a Hollywood movie. We watched it.
Yeah.
It happened last night. That is beyond – I am still at a loss. It's my job to talk about things. I am still at a loss in finding the right words to truly describe how insane it is that actually happened.
You had referenced that McGregor is coming back to fight.
McGregor's fighting Max Holloway in July.
I thought that dude was in a heap of trouble.
Dude, he's been in a heap of trouble so many times. Again, the UFC is not the type of organization that cares.
Sure.
You know? And by the way, Neil Elatrosh.
Dr.
Elatrosh being dragged in one very tiny corner of the media because he repaired Conor McGregor's leg when he had his terrible leg break.
Okay.
He did the surgery to repair the leg. And then, according to some investigative journalism, prescribed heavy regimen of performance-enhancing drugs for the injury recovery process. Yeah. And that led Conor to be about 200 pounds and starring opposite Jake Gyllenhaal in a Roadhouse remake and continuing his absurd behavior and all that stuff. But now he's back, and he's back in the testing pool, and he's fighting Max Holloway, who's an absolute legend.
And you think there's a shot that Gaethje might get a shot at McGregor?
Well,
that'd be cool.
If I'm Justin Gaethje, what I'm saying is he's 37. The other guys that are in title contention in that division are young killers. Terrible matchups, right? I want a big money fight.
Yeah.
Now I'm the champion. I'm going to say I got maybe one more fight. If I were him, I'd retire now because that's as high a note as you're going to go out on. If I got one more fight, and I want to make $10 million, Conor McGregor is the only opponent that can do that for you.
That'd be really cool to see. Because, without knowing much about him, when he came in studio to pub his fight, super nice, like, decent guy. Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't want to take up, because there's a lot that Spence Checketts needs to get to today on the drive. His Knicks are NBA champions. Make sure you stay tuned. We'll do the Sean O'Connell Show again tomorrow. It's ESPN.